Blessed love and peace. So I got a thought to share, and actually a couple classic scenes from a few classic scenes from a few classic films from back in the day. These are all, let's see, these are actually predominantly 90s films. I think one of them might be a 2000s film, so they're at least over 20 years old. Some of them pushing 30. Anyways, here we go. The first film and the first scene is, think about the sequence on this joint. All right. This one is from Ronin, featuring Robert De Niro and a number of actually high-profile actors, a number of whom are actually international. One is French, one is Danish, and that's just a few of them. A few are Irish. Anyways, this particular scene, the film is like espionage. It's basically about like an undercover CIA worker who's pretending to be like rogue and doing his own thing and working with the criminal outfit, organized crime, IRA, working to get like this, working to hijack like this briefcase that has, like, you can tell that it's dated somewhat. I don't even know what the espionage James Bond type stuff is today, what the criminals are doing, and what the like the tangible thing of exchange is in the era of cyber whatever. But this particular one was like the old school 80s type of thing, where somebody had a briefcase. That briefcase had like the codes to a nuclear weapon or whatever, and it was being guarded by like this underground criminal syndicate or whatever. And so the IRA was trying to like hijack and grab that case amidst the security or whatever, and have it for itself accordingly. So and there are a lot of different groups, cartels, whatever, that were in play for trying to get that same thing. So the IRA outfit hired this like group of mercenaries, including the undercover CIA agent and whatever else. Anyways, all that being said, point is a classic scene from that film is towards the end of it, when one of the mercenaries, at some point, once they get the item, once they get the briefcase, then like all the mercenaries are out for self. And at one point, one of the mercenaries has the briefcase and is making a deal with the Russians to sell the briefcase. And the mercenary is like, he's this genius or whatever, and he has his own crew that are low key, this, that, and the other. And so in this scene, the guy, the Deutsch brethren, is making a deal with the Russian. He has the briefcase right there, and like wants the money, and they make the exchange. Now they're doing it at this like ice skating thing or whatever, and the Russian boss has a girlfriend who he loves, adores, and everything, who's like this world-class figure skater, ice skater, and so when the brethren, they're making a deal whilst this ice skating show is going on in the facility with all the crowd around it and everything. And so the Deutsch brethren is there by himself, and he goes up into the thing. That's where the meeting is, and they're in the private room, whatever. And so they do the exchange, briefcase, okay, money, check it, okay, cool, or maybe it was a wire transfer, whatever it was. Everything, all right, Brent, all right, you too. I'm not gonna have a good one actually, but that's another conversation. So anyway, I have to like do these rhetoric exercises, whatever, particularly when people give commands, but then it's like drive-by comments. I'm in the middle of something right now, so we continue on. Actually, it factors into what I'm talking about, actually, to be honest. It's not a big deal, but it does factor into it. And if I remember, God willing, I can explain why. But that's the latest scene. Anyways, in this scene, the brethren is in the room by himself with the Russian crew, the boss man and everything. They did the exchange. Everything's copacetic. Then, after everything checks out, the Dutchman got his money and he's ready to go. And the Russian boss recognizes, yep, this is the briefcase, this is the things we want. Okay, so done deal. Now, when everything's done, then the Russian boss says, okay, now, tell me why. And the Deutsch guy is like, tell you why what? And he's like, tell me why. Like, why am I letting you walk out this room alive? And so then the Deutsch, it's the whole, like, what flex kind of thing or whatever. It's the basic gangster kind of situation. Double cross on the deal or whatever. And so it's the whole Hollywood film thing of like the criminal mastermind explaining all their intricate plots of why people have to abide by what they do or whatever else. So now that's what the Deutsch Brethren thinks about. Like he's like, oh, you want me to tell you why you're letting me out? Oh, okay, fine, sure. So it just so happens that I have a friend who's an excellent that word is called sniper. And like we have instructions, like they're right now, they're in the rafters, you're not going to find them. And if I don't call them in a certain time, that girlfriend that you adore so much, she's dead. And so the Deutschman is thinking the Russian mobster boss loves her so much that he wouldn't risk like her life for the sake of getting his money back. And so like the Russian boss is kind of laughing or whatever, and then so the Deutschman is thinking, you know, TikTok, man, it's on you, and the Russian mobster kills him. And when he does that, and sure indeed, the sniper kills the ice skater, and the mob, the crowd gets hysterical and leaves the thing. So the point being, like the genius Deutsch mastermind somewhat miscalculated the sentimentality of the Russian mobster. So anyways, it's a Hollywood film, but that point is like, tell me why we don't do this right now. Like what do you know? What have you figured out? What have you planned that we haven't calculated yet? That's keeping us from doing dirt on you at this moment. That's the first consideration. That's the first scene. Here's the second one. The second one is another classic film. To be honest, much less, like actually thoroughly, I won't say lightweight, thoroughly like just like disgusted, to be honest, with the filmmaker himself, Quentin Tarantino. Just very just very racist across the board, all different types, whether it's Africans, whether it's Asians, just anybody who he doesn't think is himself. And it's not even necessarily intentional, it's just like who he thinks he is, or whatever. Anyway, that being said, that becomes further evident. I mean, maybe I was still, when watching the films, no excuses, and I'm talking about it still. But in the early stages, he's very popular. His films are popular. It's the shoot 'em up, action-packed, da-da-da-da-da. And so it was a very effective methodology formula, and I watched some of the films, and there's a memorableness, and there's still an appropriateness, particularly in this particular film, which was actually one of his later films. After already seeing like a lot about him. This is before Django Unchained. This is before Kill Bill and all those other things that were just blatantly racist. This is after Pulp Fiction, which was like right on the border. It's like scripting that type of language and talking about black people. Initially, Samuel Jackson, when casting him, like has a lot of credibility, at least at that time, before he starts doing other things. So it was like right on that border of like, yo, I don't like Quentin Tarantino writing these type of scripts, but like Sam Jackson's on it, so I can't hate it too much. But then I haven't even seen Django Unchained. I saw Kill Bill, and it's just so woefully, unapologetically, ignorantly, like trying to like pimp talk it away, racist and hateful, and like it's actually extremely dangerous to communicate these type of things. Now, all that being said, even Inglourious Basterds, which is the film I'm referencing, Inglourious Basterds, there's a classic scene, and I mean his films are compelling. He's skillful in those respects, just like Biggie Smalls is very skillful in his lyrics and everything else like that. But he just talks about ignorant stuff. So Quentin Tarantino doesn't even just talk about ignorant stuff. He spews a very dangerous mentality of hate. It's ignorance, and it's hate, and it's violence. And it resonates with people who like carry that on. So that's what shines. All that being said, we're going to talk about this film particularly still. Inglourious Basterds, Nazis. How about that? So in this particular scene, this is the scene in the pub when there's that undercover British agent posing as a Nazi officer who's born and raised in some very incognito location, little known in Deutschland, which explains his unusual accent, and additionally, and so he's all rather schooled and everything else like that. So he's in the pub, he's trying to like secure an informant or whatever, and like do an exchange or whatever, and it just so happens as he's doing that and like almost like finishing the success, then the head honcho villain character from the Nazis like decides to sit down at the table and start asking him questions like, yo, who are you, and like, why do you talk like that? And They go on and on and on. And by that point, after a conversation, and meanwhile they're drinking and they're laughing and they're joking and everything else. They pretend smiling and getting along and just playing the role. And eventually, like the villain Nazi person kind of like sniffs him out and is like, yo, no, this guy's bullshit. This guy is an agent, and he lets it be known. And like they continue smiling and everything else like that. And at some point, the Nazi brethren is like, yo, I got a gun under this table pointed right at you. And like I'm not letting you leave this place alive. And the British agents were like, well, ditto, chap. I have a gun right under the table pointed right at you, and I'm getting out of here by any means necessary, and my crew too. So that's what they're smiling and joking on the surface, drinking beer and having a fun time, whilst at the same time, the whole time, have guns pointed right at them, ready to like pull the trigger at any moment, whilst having all that fun. And that's what happens. They started, and the British agent was like, well, you know, okay, if the ruse is up, I'm gonna go out speaking the kings. One of the lines from that joint, or whatever else. So he stops playing the role and just like starts talking English with his proper British accent and everything else like that. And he's like, yeah, you got me. And we're in this pub. You got your crew around you already, who don't know what's going on necessarily. In terms of like at the other tables, it's just the small circle at that media table, and like, yo, we about to go out in the blaze type situation. And that's what happens. They just start pulling triggers and bop, 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 and pretty much everybody in the pub gets killed, almost. But anyways, the point is in that scene that dramatic irony and that extreme tension of people pretending to be nice with each other, joking and laughing and having a beer and da-da-da-da-da, but at the same time do not trust each other at all, hate each other, ready to kill each other, and to the point of actually having guns, finger on the trigger, pointing at each other whilst joking and laughing and having beers with each other. That's the second joint. The third joint is another film, which is Shawshank Redemption. So in Shawshank Redemption, there's the classic, it's a scene, I don't know how much of a classic it is. It's a classic film with all the challenges within it as well. It's not a buddy film. I'm trying to think like what category it would fit in. But basically in this scene, it's when the jig is up. When the brethren, Tim Robbins' character, done already broke out, and they find out when it's too late. They get into a cell. They find out, yo, the whole time when he's been doing thing and everything else like that, he's been digging a hole in his cell and getting out. And so on that rain, thunder day, he climbed through the sewage for how long, whatever, and then got to freedom. Had it all planned out. Not only that, he's got the records, because the whole time he was there, like for years, he was siphoning money for the warden. He was doing dirt for the warden, siphoning a lot of money. His profession was an accountant. So for years, he was cooking the books and doing this thing for the warden to get favors or whatever else. And so the warden was doing dirt by doing these books or whatever. And Tim Robbins had all the evidence. Not only did he have the evidence, but he had the accounts, the count records, and everything else like that, the files, the code words, and everything else like that, because he was doing that. So. And the thing, actually, the scene isn't when the jig is up. It's actually before the jig is up. Actually, what had happened was, and I mixed the scenes up. Actually, to be honest, so my bad. You can take the. It's not an apology, but it's just my bad, because I can't promise that I won't do it again. Didn't do it intentionally, but it's a bit different scene. It's before Tim Robbins escapes. What had happened was. Tim Robbins did not commit the crime that he was in jail for. His wife got killed, and the person that the man the wife was having an affair with got killed, and like Tim Robbins didn't even know. So he's like, wow, he's betrayed, and now he was charged with a murder, and so that's what he was in jail for. And he was in jail for years, and all the hell happened to him and everything else like that. Now, eventually, as the story unfolds, whatever, late in the film, like towards like the resolution of the film. That leads to the resolution of the film. There's another inmate that arrives at the jail years later who is like bragging to another inmate about that particular crime, and so they had evidence like, yo, there's this dude who just admitted to the crime. And so like Tim Robbins, after doing the dirt and being on friendly terms, the warden likes him. He's making the warden money, he's doing favors for the guards, so now the guards are looking out for him. So the people like him. He's a nice guy. He's a likable guy. He's just like this no whatever accountant. He's not trying to like hurt people. He's staying low. He's getting done dirty himself, and he didn't even do the crime. And so, but he's finding a way to ingratiate himself with the people around him, so that like he can make the circumstances as proficient as possible. And so he's been doing this dirt for the warden for years and years, and the warden likes him because he's doing him the favor and getting him money. So then when everything like is unfolding, and they like, yo, we got this inmate who's confessed to killing my wife and her lover or whatever, not even lover, her sex partner. Yo, are you gonna look out and like follow through? And the warden was just like, no, like you can't leave here. Like I mean, I don't know if he said this explicitly. Peace and blessing, bro. Whether he said it outright, but that was basically it. Like, nah, I don't care if you get innocent or guilty. You think I like you? Nah, you mine. Like, you in here, I got you. You doing this thing for me? Yeah, I'm nice to you, but don't get it twisted. Like you doing this, and if you leave here, then you won't be doing that, and that don't benefit me none, supposedly. So nah, you gonna stay here. I don't care, innocent, whatever. And Tim Robbins was just like, wow, like I've been doing this for you for years, looking out, like faithfully, like regularly, properly, just thoroughly, like doing this thing, and you're not even gonna like this is my life, yo. I'm in jail, and like I didn't even do it. And so what the point I'm getting to is this line, where Tim Robbins says, "How can you be so obtuse?" And the warden don't know what obtuse means. Like, what did you call me? How could you be so obtuse? Like, how are you going to be just so, like, belligerently ignorant, obtuse, just so selfish and whatever else? Like, all these years, I've been working for you and everything, and you can't even like do the right thing by me. Like, how can you be so obtuse? And so, because of that, he might have gotten some beat up or whatever, but that's when Tim Robbins makes the decision. He himself was already digging the tunnel for years that whole time. So when he found out like he had evidence, like there's no it's not going to get any better than that. There's no greater likelihood of being released, parole or otherwise. Like there's evidence, there's a testimony. Somebody else has already confessed to the crime, and justice is not going to be done. So Tim Robbins is like, okay, this is the time to break out, and so that's when he makes his move. Now the aftermath of that is that when the warden finds out, and this is the scene. When the warden finds out, he goes into the cell. First they're looking for him. Tim Robbins doesn't show up, or he's a no-show or whatever. He's not in the cell when it's time for check-in in the AM. And so then the guards come in, search the cell or whatever else, and then they're like, yo, where'd he go? Like, ain't nothing here. They throw, the warden is infuriated because the prospect of Tim Robbins being on the loose like is an immediate threat to the warden, because the Tim Robbins got all the information, all the records and everything else like that, to the accounts of what's been going on, the cookbooks and everything else like that. So the warden is furious with the prospect of Tim Robbins being like gone. So at one point he throws the stone at the wall, at a poster of a woman on the wall, and the stone just keeps on going, and they're like doop 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 doop, like through a cave. And that's a classic scene. They're like, what the fuck? And then they tear off the poster, and whoa, there's the tunnel. Haha, that whole time the poster was there. He's been digging a tunnel. And so that's when they found out he escaped. Now, as the story unfolds, this point is the resolution going into the denouement. As the story unfolds, Tim Robbins, that's what he does. He gets out. He planned it all out. He got a change of clothes. He got the books with him. He got the bank account records. And so before they found out, like when they're finding out about his cell and everything, that AM is already at the bank account, or is already at the bank, in his suit and everything, with all the records, all the account information and numbers and everything else like that, and making a withdrawal, probably cashier's check or whatever else, 100 years ago, and bounces. He got all that money that was being siphoned away through the cookbooks, and then he's already got his dream destination or whatever else, which is part of the storyline. But anyways, that's what happens. So then what happens to the warden is that as that unfolds, and then he also mails letters talking about what the warden was doing, like cooking the books and everything else like that. So a warden being found guilty of what's it called when people do that. It's not theft. It's a white collar crime. We don't call it theft. That's so pedestrian. It's not extortion. Whatever, embezzlement. That's what we call it. That's one charge, embezzlement. So a warden convicted of embezzlement of like prison funds or whatever, yo, that's jail, and that's jail, yo, that's hell. Just like a dirty cop or anybody else who's a law officer or whatever being sent to jail, yo, that's hell. In this life, in this earthly life. So the warden could not face that. So what happens when like he finds out and he knows like, yo, the jig is up for him? He looks outside and there come the squad cars or whatever else to like scoop him up. Takes whatever I think he had a revolver or some kind of pistol in his desk drawer, takes it out and kills himself. So nasty ending, but the audience, I guess, is supposed to have this sense of satisfaction about justice being served. I mean, that's the whole unfolding. It's just like the redemption of the Shawshank. Anyways, those are the three classic scenes. So now putting all that together, we got My Life, My Life, My Life, My Life, My Life. That would be Mary J. Blige and whoever writes the lyrics with Mary J. Blige. So, peace and blessings. This is what we're talking about. The first situation is like explaining, yo, why not do things to us? If we pop it off at the mouth. First of all, again, there's no one on this earth, generally speaking, that has any legitimate beef with us. The only kinfolk on this earth that have any legitimate beef with me personally is the relatives, the kinfolk of any women that I do dirty over 20 years ago. Basically, that's the only kinfolk that have legitimate beef with me, and there's little I can do about that at this point. I reach out to Sistren and further make apologies to those that I can get in contact with. I learn better, I do better, and I abstain from doing that dirt since then for over 20 years. So other than that, there ain't nobody on this earth, to be honest, that has legitimate beef with me. And that's no cap. I live a life that is extremely tedious, and it ain't perfect, and I'm not better than anybody else, but I live a life thoroughly for there to be no reason for anybody to have beef with me, whether it's the streets, for anything I say or whatever else. If when cats don't like what I say, that's fine, but at the same time, what I say is thorough, and we can argue, we can reason about it. I'm not saying things out of hate. I'm not saying things out of shade. I'm saying things not just because they're facts, and I can qualify it as we perceive it, whatever. That goes for anybody. Not just because it's facts or it's truth, but it's necessary. It's for a purpose, that purpose is healing. It's calling out afflictions and atrocities, but it's also for the greater purpose of healing. And the cats want to have beef about that. Yo, again, cats got beef with themselves, and that's not insult or whatever. Again, it's facts. So, and we have to. Cats might not give a fuck about facts. That's fine, and we have to deal with that accordingly. That's life. But there's no legitimate beef, and that's what helps us like sleep thoroughly or whatever else when we are able to sleep thoroughly. But anyways, now, so what stops kinfolk? Ain't nothing. I mean, everything's the Most High. We walk with God. We step on faith. Now, what stops the bosses? And when we're talking about bosses, we're not talking about gangster bosses. Gangster bosses are always in somebody else's pocket, one way or the other. Eventually, like the highest bosses that are not in somebody else's pocket, or at least the least amount in somebody else's pocket, are in another country. And can't even say Mexico or Colombia or even Russia or otherwise, because Russia is a different situation. But particularly any colonized nation is probably the closest it gets to where like gangsterism is the most autonomous and independent. Otherwise, in any kind of established form of government, like the gangsterism is always connected with the conventional hierarchy. If it's not the actual government, it's the leadership behind the government. So that being said, all the gangsters on the streets here, regardless of how they can be multi-billionaires, they're still in somebody else's pocket, because there are multi-billionaire syndicates, and additionally, and kinfolk, any gangster has to have like some kind of like back. from that type of level to be doing things as it's done. From even at the very beginnings of getting the first whatever it is key or whatever else, to getting to be a kingpin or whatever. On the streets, ain't nobody challenging them, but like the streets is just part of the game. So point being, honing it back in, when we talk about bosses, why the bosses just do me in or whatever else? Here we go. This is an explanation. So this is the first scene that we're talking about. Like, so tell us why we don't just dead you now? Why don't we just like scoop you up, take you away, and do what we want? Because we're tired of you talking. We're tired of you hating on LGBTQ. We're tired of you talking about pedophilia and cannibalism, and we're tired of you like thinking you all this, that, and the other. We're tired of dealing with you. We're tired of people talking to us about you. So what's stopping us? There are many things. First of all, all things happen according to the grace of the Most High. But then we also have this. In an earthly sense, what one of the things that provides that earthly stop. There are many things actually. This is like middle level. This is middle level. This is serious. This is like boss level, but it's still only middle level. First, the higher level is not even earthly. It's spiritual. God. The will of God and everything. Everything happens for the will. There's no guarantee. Things don't happen in the next second. There's no guarantee on anything in my life. So we don't presume that otherwise. But in the meanwhile, until that moment, like we continue doing what we recognize and what we're guided to do, what we're commanded to do in this life, promote the well-being of others with the talents that we're provided and the skills. So we keep on doing. Now that's the spiritual, and that's way beyond anything measurable in the earthly. When we talk about the earthly, we talk about things like we get into the cipher, we get into the subliminal, we get into the dreaming and the wakeful memories and experience and influence of the dreaming in the wakeful state. How people are informed, how people are guided, how people are inspired, how people are feared, are fearful or discouraged from the dreaming, and additionally in this manifested earthly state. That's way further than the bosses, and additionally, because it's beyond the control of threats and everything else like that. So those are some of the higher earthly experiences that are precluding kinfolk from getting at. And this is just some of it. We're nothing. We're nothing to be get at anyways. We're not out to conquer people, and that's part of the discipline. That's part of the trod, the humbleness and modesty. There's a little motivation. Again, there's no legitimate beef that kinfolk has. So that's another reason. There's also just like the cause and effect, the consequences of actions, and just how the game works. There's always a price to pay for anything that's done, and so there's a price that could be calculated and otherwise. And you think, okay, if we do this, then we have to cover this up and deal with the blowback and this and that. But there's always a price greater than the pre-calculations, and so you have to make a discernment of whether it's worth it or not. And sometimes it's just like, yeah, bump it, whatever, blah, there it is. So that's part of it. Now, that gets into the lower levels, the mid levels of the earthly reasons for anybody, for myself. And this is along those middle levels of the earthly as well, particularly for the bosses. But what this is explanation of like some of the intuitive, intrinsic ways that international law works. The law between nations, the law between syndicates, the law between cartels, and additionally. So first of all, this is the sovereignty that we are affiliated with, a sovereignty, an earthly sovereignty that we're affiliated with. You can say, oh, it's just imagination. They just printed it themselves. Welcome to world sovereignty. The question is who's gonna buy it? So here's the further explanation of what it is. I don't even know if it's legible at the moment. That's less to the point. But I'm gonna talk about this anyways. But I'm just showing like where it's articulated, so that when we show this, people can see it for themselves. If and whenever it gets to this point, we've already shown it. So this is particularly what we're talking about here. We're talking about the law that substantiates this proclamation of sovereignty amidst all the other sovereignties of the world, in as much a legitimate way, and even in many ways further legitimate than the nations of the member nations of the United Nations. Because the member nations of the United Nations don't promise to uphold Torah, don't promise to uphold the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita or the Digha Nikaya or the Quran or the Gospels or additionally. And so anybody who does actually has a further authority in the spiritual and amongst the religious than even the greatest nations with the biggest militaries. So authority is a transcendent phenomenon. What often people are equating with authority is force and the threat of violence. So I mean that's what some mindsets of what some people are on, but authority exists way further than just that. That's gangsterism. They're just a force. So anyways, and the difference between gangsters and governments is that governments have learned how to take prisoners. That's the fundamental difference between gangsters and governments. Plain and simple. Facts. That was a little bit of a stretch of facts, but it's still, we can reason about that. Anyways, what I showed you just a second ago is this passport, and it's also the law that we are proclaiming as substantiating this passport, and we have to be held accountable. We are held accountable. This is not just like, oh, we learned something, and now let's flex it. We've got promises to uphold, to keep, and miles to go before we sleep. So it provides a pause at the very least for anybody who has a consideration of doing there. A lot of kinfolk are ignorant of the laws that are included there. I'm supposed to show something specifically. I'll see if I'll just reference it. A lot of kinfolk, particularly on the streets or whatever, don't care about that. I don't give a fuck about that. But again, those aren't the bosses. The bosses do care, because here we go into the international law. Do we do this now? Yeah. Okay. So some of the international law. I mentioned the religious teachings. That's what we do, and to the best of our ability, we are observant of the teachings and the commandments in those. Not perfect. We have to make amends and atonement, particularly at this moment. It's a process of teshuva at the moment. Elul, the shofar is sounding on a daily basis, and leading up to Rosh Hashanah next week. So that's part of the deen. Ramadan, similarly, when that occurs in a few months from this point, and Paryushan in Jain tradition, and other rituals and responsibilities from the different traditions. That is part of our walk and part of the nature of our authority and part of the nature of the law that backs us and what we do, but that we also are held accountable to and answerable to as well. So the Gospels and further. So that's part of it. That's the spiritual. What is also included in that list of laws is actual earthly international law. That includes, I think, if not the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from the United Nations. One of those documents. I have to look at it again to be specific and to be honest. There's additional treaty. I think it's the Treaty of Versailles as well as the Treaty of Westphalia. Those are some of the international treaties. I don't think. Well, some of the international treaties. Now, the point of that is just to give a description of how that works. The basics is this. Let's talk about, like, again, the Treaty of Westphalia, or we can talk about the Treaty of Versailles. So first of all, some people say, wait, you're not a signatory. Rastafari is not a signatory of those treaties, and so it doesn't have any applicability, and you can't call sovereignty and invoke protections or whatever else. You're not a signatory of that. Guess what? Nobody alive is a signatory of either of those treaties. Certain people, certain constituencies are legacies of those treaties. So there's that. And indeed, there are a number of nations that didn't exist when a number of these treaties are established. But what happens is this. The people who do sign those treaties, whether they're monarchs at that time, whether they're national leaders, or otherwise, nations are actually a recent phenomenon that occur after some of these treaties. The Magna Carta itself. Those who do sign and are signatories of these treaties, a lot of the names you've never heard of before. They might sound funny. They are low-key, like the what we call it. It's beyond just the leaders. They're the ones who hold the strings. Just like when you look at the U.S. Constitution and you see the signatories on the U.S. Constitution, you're like, wait, hold up. Where are all those names I ever heard about? I never heard of any of these names. Those are the ones who own the property, or at least the representatives of those who own the property. Like, actually, you don't know. And then after they sign it, they go back into their own hoods, and like you don't hear about them again. They busy doing their own thing. You don't hear about them, but whenever they need to make a decision or whatever, they call it in. It's like those are the bosses, and they're again, they can be monarchs and they might have a notable name, but oftentimes they're like low key. I won't say vassals, but they're low key, like smaller sovereigns or members of nobility and otherwise, other houses, other families, and so it gets very intricate. It gets very intricate in Europe, in the Middle East, Asia, all around the world. Like, these things continue to exist, and they're very influential. And when there's a necessity of kinfolk making agreements or whatever else, either send representatives, or on the infrequent occasion, like get together directly, be okay, let's be in agreement here. These treaties are one of those examples. And then when these treaties are signed after warfare, and additionally, or just adjustments of like terms of trade or whatever, then each one goes back to their own spot, and then they keep on running things wherever they're at, and that's it. And they leave each other alone as long as they abide by those treaties. And they each have their own constituency. They each have their own court and nobility and their hierarchies. And those hierarchies, the people in their crew, like, are in the institutions that you hear about, whether it's government, whether it's corporations, or otherwise. And so all these institutions that are doing the economics, that are building the militaries, that are doing the technology, that are establishing the universities, and additionally, the leadership in these institutions are affiliated with those kingpins, with the boss figures that you don't, whose names you don't know, you ain't heard about before, but the ones who are the signatories of those public agreements, low-key public agreements from hundreds of years ago, and it's inherited from generation to generation. It's the lineage, it's the quiet legacy acceptances here and there, and like, no, just don't ask questions. Like, no, they're okay, that type of thing. And many of the agreements that we include here, many of those are from hundreds of years ago in the European situation, and then some of it is from the world situation. So the world situation is further recent, but it's just a further comprehensive experience amongst the bosses and the remote bosses from around the world. So the thing is, whenever there's a violation of those treaties, then that undergirds the stronghold that each of those bosses have. And there can be warfare, there can be assassination or whatever else, but whatever it is bad for all participants. So it very much behooves the kinfolk to abide by these agreements, because they got enough things about people trying to overthrow them anyways within their own constituencies and other competitors who are outside of that agreement. So when they're able to secure peace and treaties with other groups, then they don't have to worry about that as much, and they can spend further monies and investment and stress dealing with the other challenges or whatever. So when the treaties are violated, it becomes chaotic, and it's a tremendous threat to all the kinfolk. All the bosses have a very vested interest in abiding by the treaties, and when those treaties are violated, then that underseats the positions of those bosses. Even generations later, even hundreds of years later, those treaties still have, the legacies continue. The names might change, the names of the institutions might change, but the treaties continue to have that relevance, even centuries later. The Magna Carta itself, is it not still, whatever house it is, the Windsor, to this day? And again, you can think of all the lineage, all the strings that go from that, and that's just one participant. That's just one example of one treaty. So there are a number of treaties, prominent treaties. I mean, there's hundreds of treaties, but there are a few prominent treaties, like the king, like the head bosses, like when things were going down, and like there was like significant warfare, serious warfare, like, and we got together, we did the table, this and the other. Then there it is, and the order is kept. Like Europe, except for the World Wars or whatever, and then after the World Wars, again, another treaty. But still, it's not like, even then, it's not like completely abrogating, because even during the warfare, there's still like certain cooperations and certain understandings and additionally, and then the treaties after the warfare are just kind of like, we're basically building off of the preceding treaty. So there's still the intactedness, even though it's been broken. There's still the intactedness, the precedents, and the continuing foundation of the preceding treaties, even after being violated. An example of that is the League of Nations, that breaks this treaty by not going to the aid of Ethiopia and otherwise, and so it dissolves and it becomes no further. But at the same time, then emerges the United Nations, and the United Nations basically builds upon what the League of Nations is before that, just a few decades before that, with some learned lessons and some adaptations, and further leadership of the survivors through that, like His Majesty Haile Selassie I. So that's some of like the playing out of international law, and how even when being broken, there's still the legacy and the influence of the treaties. And when all right, so that's some of it. Whether how convincing that is, that's when people become further knowledgeable about how the law works and the nature of authority, then there's further understanding, and how the soldiers, how the enforcers of the law, the police, and additionally, like have to abide. I don't say have to, but how just the nature of how the enforcers abide by the laws, abide by the bosses, the immediate bosses, police chiefs, mayors, governors, presidents, who abide by the further laws, constitutions, and the U.S. Constitution itself abides by the further law, even the Magna Carta, and preceding doctrines of law, because that's the nature of order. To be able to do trade and have things like NATO, and additionally have to respect the international agreements and the international standards, regardless of how much a potentate at the moment might pop off at the mouth and say ignorant things or whatever else. The nation itself has to recognize the international law, the international standards, and otherwise. And so that's what we're talking about. And when there's an abrogation of that law, it's not just like, oh, they broke the law. No, it's a cosmic violation, and it underseats the nature of authority and the nature of order. That's beyond anybody's calculation. So, and the extenuating capacity of that disruption, it can be severe. So, which gives the bosses significant motivation not to do that. Now, again, Kim folks say, but that's not you. You didn't sign that yourself. You're well, you can't say I'm not a legacy, but like you're not a leader in terms of like of the U.S. government or whatever else that inherits that legacy. But that's yes, kind of, sort of, but nah, kind of, sort of, yes and no, because yes, we're not part of the United States. The United States is not a part of a number of those treaties, anyways. However, the United States is a continuum, even of the Magna Carta. The United States is a continuum of that. Even after going to war with the United Kingdom, in addition, the United States is still a continuum of that. And there's still an applicability of the Magna Carta in many ways. We get into like the theoretical notions of law, in addition, but there's still a governing authority and an effect. So much of the details of the Magna Carta are effectively inapplicable to the United States, because it deals with land and specific tracts of land and conditions accordingly, which is the United States is not in there. But in terms of standards, and additionally, a lot of the precepts and laws and principles within the Magna Carta are included or transferred into the notions of protections, rights, and responsibilities that are included within the U.S. Constitution. So it's like being the child, the U.S. Constitution being a child of the Magna Carta, even though the U.S. Constitution is further immediate child of the Guyana-Shigowa, the Law of the Great Peace from Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederation. I'm talking a lot. It's a lot of information. It's going to be overload for some. But we are making a point. We are making progress in making the point too. So continuing on, we're just going with the conditions. We in the streets at night at that hangout spot. So we're dealing with that as too as whilst we talk about this. Now the further thing on this respect about like the legacy and like why bosses don't violate the treaties, and additionally because there's little telling. Well, there's little telling how that disruption will play out ultimately, and like the extent of it. So there's a severe motivation for bosses not to do that. Now, if people can see that and say, okay, yeah, when there's a pact on the street, like the bosses generally don't want to violate that pact, because then not only do they risk get back from the other parts of members of that pact, but it looks bad on the street. Their reputation gets sullied because they welched or they betrayed their own word, and so like they recognize it's a weakness. Somebody betrays, goes against what they promise. That's a weakness for any boss or anybody. So it's a very high. There's a very high liability for going against one's word, particularly on the streets, let alone in the international streets and in the world game. So that being said, okay, fine. Some people might be able to see that, but yeah, again, well, hold up, Rastafari, you claiming to be Rastafari? What you talking about? You holding that as like part of what backs you and stops people from doing this and the other. What you talking about? So, one, anybody who has knowledge about these treaties and the laws, the principles that are espoused within the treaties, is a de facto participant and member of that treaty, because the knowledge of that treaty, the knowledge of the principles of the treaty, the knowledge of the participants in that treaty is weight. And it's not absolute categorical official weight, but it is weight. And you can recognize it, because most of the enforcers of the laws of today, police officers, soldiers, and additionally don't know those laws. And the nature of law itself, yes, it's one thing to be a signatory, obviously, but when you know the law, that's it. It's like, it's like being a doctor, and like, well, you don't have the credentials, you didn't go to school, you don't have a medical degree, you didn't pass the board or whatever, you don't have a certificate, you don't have a license to practice medicine. No, but I learned how to set broken bones. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. So, there it is. The nature of law is similar to that, and just like if you don't heed what the medical doctor says in terms of advice when it's the actual thing, okay, then get sick, deal with the broken bone or whatever else, or if you do listen, you're like, okay, yeah, here's your bone is healing, congratulations. Yeah, still don't have no degree, don't have no board certification, whatever. I don't have to call myself a doctor. I can call myself a Rastafari natural healer. It's the same knowledge and it's the same effect. So, and I'm not asking for salary. You don't have to pay me for it, whatever else. So that's part of the protections of those credentials, of that knowledge, is the commodification of it and otherwise. So now that's one way of describing, but some people might say, okay, that seems something or whatever, but still, like, wait, no, hold up. Still, you're not a nation. Your Rastafari nation itself isn't even a signatory of it as well. I mean, what I just said still is applicable, and I'm trying to think of the other thing further to share, to provide further explanation or description about that. I seem to recall there being something further to share immediately. Okay. Well, another way. Okay, I gave the medical way, but another way of describing is like, of like knowing the code word, and the code word is a universal experience. So let's say honesty. Let's say like there's a group of people who like the code word to get in the club is honesty. All right, we're gonna do this one. No, let's do something else. Let's say just truth. It's truth. Let's say just the code word is truth. Anybody who knows the word truth, they get in. Is that not? But it's not just a matter of knowing truth, but it's a matter of actually practicing truth. That's what it is. So let's say the code word is truth, and if you know the code word, then you get in truth. But the way it's known that you know the code word is actually by observing how you live truth. And so when you show that you live truth, then that's the proper proof that you're part of this compact. So people who are living truth and know the word truth, there it is. So what we're talking about here is that the treaties represent principles of sharing, of fairness, of sovereignty, of discipline. And the signatories are the ones who are like in the know, who are official, and additionally, it's a little bit of a faint example. And to be honest, I'm getting fatigued at the moment, so my creativity in terms of giving an explanation on this might be for another day, perhaps. But the point, just to finish that one out, is just that saying like once people know the truth and are living it, that's what it is. And particularly if people violate somebody who's living truth, that affects everybody who's living truth. And that applies to the signatories. So, man, these are faint ways. I had it a while ago. A better example, a better way of explaining it. But maybe the situation is similar to that situation of like, well, you know what? I don't know. Gonna let you walk out this room with the briefcase and without being done up. I don't know. Well, here's the other thing too. We're not trying to have no money. We're not walking out. We're not doing dirt. We're not involved in, if we're gonna apply the basics of that scene. We're not in some clandestine kind of thing. We're all up front. We're all open. We're all public. So first of all, we're not in a game of dirt. We're not in a game of blood and conquest. So um, there are some elements of that scene and that storyline that are applicable to what we share. Um, but there are also a lot of fundamental differentials as well. So just trying to give some kind of like pop culture kind of description or explanation of peace and blessings. So um, that's one thing of just like the things that are holding people from doing dirt when they could do it right there. Not just doing dirt, but being dirty, being bloody. What's stopping them from doing it when they can't figure that for themselves? So um, the laws that we're articulating here, we abide by. And so, in abiding by these laws, we know the basics of these laws, and we practice it. I mean, the basics of the religious laws. When somebody practices those, somebody is practicing those earthly laws, because the earthly laws require much less discipline. And once somebody has the heavenly spiritual laws, those such kinfolk already have a knowledge about authority and sovereignty. So when people are living in a genuine spiritual path, such kinfolk already have an earthly sovereignty and an earthly authority. It just becomes a matter of how knowledgeable kinfolk are about earthly laws. But the sovereign mindset and the authority mindset are already there. The discipline is already there. So when that's there, that's like 90%. That's 90% of the work right there. Peace and blessings, brother. All right. The other 10% is knowing the actual laws themselves. Generally, the Treaty of Westphalia, the Treaty of Versailles, the United Nations Charter, and/or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And for those who know, like even just a smidgen of international law, you say, hold up, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that's not binding. It's a voluntary, like semi-treaty, quasi-treaty that's used for primarily propaganda and human rights education initiatives. That's not a binding law on nations. Yes and no. The nature of international law itself, even the whole of the United Nations, is de jure non-binding. So anything, even the United Nations Charter itself and all the other treaties, kind of sort of. Again, it's the international law, and understanding that much of international law isn't even a matter about much of the United Nations is not even about the agreements that are brokered directly, officially through the United Nations. It's the diplomacy, and it's the different channels of facilitating agreements, and the treaties and agreements from the United Nations are methodologies for facilitating agreements amidst disputes between nations. So there's an absence of official. I mean, there's the International Court of Justice and tribunals and this and the other. But anyways, without getting into all those details and intricacies, there's a recognition of the kind of like people say those laws have no bite, they have no tooth, as one of the legal euphemisms is. Yes and no. You ain't gotta. The only it's not necessarily the fangs that are the concern. It's the venom, and perhaps it's not necessarily the fangs, but it's the medicine, if we can do it in a positive way. But point is, something don't need to have teeth in order to feel the effect and get results. So that's one thing. Again, being the signatory, when you know the nature of sovereignty, when you know and have that the nature of authority, that's 90% of it right there. Signatory, no signatory. And to be able to interact with other authority, that's part of it. To have some knowledge, to be based in some type of law and discipline, whether it's a religious, Torah, Quran, Tao Te Ching, the Lunyu, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, Vedas, whatever it may be, the Gospels, to be rooted in a law, and then you know your authority, and then you know how to deal with other authorities in one way or another. The secular authorities or the earthly authorities of governments are lesser in many ways, but at the same time very powerful and influential. And so the spiritual authority, when it is established, is on par and in many ways over the national authorities. So It's just a matter of the spiritual authorities on this in this earthly realm having some kind of literacy about the earthly laws, and then and then negotiating and having conversations accordingly. Oftentimes, it's hiring specialists within the own community, the lawyers or whatever else. But that's the basics. So it's not necessarily about a matter of being a signatory. And the other thing also is that when one is living by the precepts of that law within the treaties, and additionally, then violations against individuals living through the precepts of those laws and principles undermines the stability of those treaties themselves. One other thing I'll say along these lines is that, as I mentioned before, many of the nations, including the United States, are established after a number of these treaties are established. And each of these nations, these subsequent political constructs, emerge from a preceding political construct that itself is a signatory through the preceding generations, or itself emerges as a political construct from another preceding political construct. So in that sense, there is an inheritance, and in that sense, we are part of the continuing legacy, because we are a political construct that emerges from the preceding political constructs that are direct parties of those signatories. And that's where okay, hold on. Now, again, that's something you can feel it, to see the connection, the lineage, the inheritance. And then with the literacy, it's like, okay, no, hold on. All right, there's something to that. But where the traction particularly is recognizing that, again, referencing those low-key names that you haven't heard about, who are the direct legacies of the bosses, who are the actual signatories. Their names are on it in the Magna Carta. The names are on the Constitution, and additionally, and how the cartels or the crews of those bosses continue to this day through the institutions of the universities and the corporations and the different societies, and additionally, they're continuing directly as descendants and inheritors of those legacies. And so it's a culture, it's a consciousness, and that the very majority of people are oblivious. I won't say completely, but are oblivious to, are just ignorant of, and so perceive it as just like imagination, or just like that doesn't mean anything, because people don't feel and experience the weight of that knowledge and that literacy. So anyways, we're speaking to that. And again, at the very least, for those who are the enforcers, who know about hierarchies, chains of command, and additionally, and are presented with something that is outside the familiarity, but sounds recognizably like wait, we should pause on this. Like if they see somebody who claims to be a diplomat and shows a passport that the police officers have never seen before, or whatever else, it might look suspect, but you haven't seen all the passports that exist today. There are 200 countries, and even further, that are not members of the United Nations, and many of those countries, they got enough back to cause headaches when and if a police officer steps out of line. So at the very least, when a police officer is presented with something, the police officer says, "Oh, hold up, we're gonna have to let's hold up." Now, again, at the same time, when somebody is presenting those credentials, they're not acting belligerent. They're not acting a fool. It's a discipline, speaking respectfully, or they are the law. Just like they see the police officer's law, they respect that, whatever the situation is. Now, if a person's drunk or whatever and does that, that's another thing. But generally speaking, like somebody who's presenting those credentials, they're not yelling at the police, they're not cussing the police out or whatever. They're being respectful, because that's part of the code, that's part of the discipline, and they're presenting it. And they're not, it may go through a process. There might be a lockup or whatever else. If somebody has orders or commands not to accept being put hands on or whatever, communicate that beforehand and just be like, look, I'm not a threat. I'm not gonna I won't say search my things or whatever, but I'm not a threat. I have the capacity to talk and answer questions, perhaps at the moment, But at the same time, I'm also under orders of not allowing hands to be put on and to defend myself amidst certain assaults or whatever else. So just be upfront, and it's not being threatening; it's just being matter of fact, because it's law speaking to law. And at the very least, it puts a pause on the enforcers and be like, okay, we're gonna have to call this in, and that's at the police level. That's at like the basic level. But we're talking about further laws and I mean further levels of bosses in terms of not even police chief, not even mayors, but we're talking about in those realms of the middle bosses of the property owners, and additionally of like saying like who are pulling those type of strings. So that's the level we're talking about at this moment, and why there's certain pause or whatever else. Not just because of fear of blowback or how the streets might respond or how the community might respond or whatever else, because there have already been very lengthy efforts of like undermining that type of support from general like the masses, and ultimately like there's an integrity beyond kinfolk being bought, but there's already been a lot of effort of trying to like put leadership in the pocket or whatever to kind of like quiet things up or whatever, because this has been for myself personally, this has been the game for over 20 years. So that being said, there's still an unpredictability factor in terms of responsiveness, even at the like the grassroots, quote unquote grassroots community level. But at this point, where we are through the ranks at a seat, a very humble, modest seat at the world table of sovereignty, the sovereign table of the world. How are we gonna put that? We got a seat there, and because of that, we got chips in the game, and because of that, just like when there's a treaty between all this the crime syndicates and the bosses in the hood, like you can't. There's a treaty on the streets right now. You can't just be going out there without sanction from all the others. And that's where things are at the world at this point. Again, we're a modest seat. It's a modest seat, but part of the process of going through Denmark, and additionally, is the establishment of where things are at this moment. And there's no guarantees, and there's no guarantees of like the collective at the table saying blah, and there's no guarantee of anybody violating that at any time, just like within gangsters. But at the same time, there is a knowledge about consequences and repercussions accordingly, and that does put pause. So that's some of what we're going on, and some of the details that we're articulating, describing in these conditions, and even without being UN member nations officially, even without being direct signatories per se on many of those treaties, we are continuing in the legacy in a direct way, as well as in a behavioral, disciplined way, and a esoteric, spiritual way. So basically, ultimately, it's how we live in this life, and that transcends all the laws, earthly laws, and that's where the discipline, that's where the authority is cultivated and evidenced. So anyways, that's the room conversation for that first scene. For the second scene, in terms of the films, the classic films or whatever, the second scene was is that Inglourious Basterds, I think? Yeah. Okay, the Inglourious Basterds scenes. Yo, that's American culture. Been that way for a long time. People fake as fuck. Smiley, friend, da 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 da. Oh yeah, get along with everybody, da 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 da. Meanwhile, can't stand each other. Got ready to get at each other. I'm not gonna. That scene is a nasty scene, and to describe that as a metaphor for American culture is nasty. But at the same time, it's actually very accurate. It may not be literal in terms of people having guns pointing at each other, but perhaps that's just because there's not a table. People don't walk around with tables to cover that. Some people walk around with guns on their strap, but people don't walk around, because there has to be, for that to be a metaphor to be literal, it has to have a cover, and people don't walk around with actual covers. So in that place, it's comparatively inapplicable even when it's actually the case. But the point is that people do walk around being fake to each other and pretend to be smiling and drinking and like each other and everything else like that, And the fact of the matter is that cats cannot stand each other. Cats cannot don't like each other, and that's not everybody. It's not absolutely, but it's pervasive. It's the norm. It's beyond the norm. And people, not only is it the norm, but those who do have affinities for each other. First, the further older, the further one ages in life, like the further away people, like the further entrenched people become in their own natures, and just don't have as much tolerance and patience to deal with people who are different from themselves. That's just the facts. That's life, and no hate. That's just nature. Kinfolk who come from cold climates, I ain't trying to mess with kinfolk who are coming from hot. Kinfolk who come from hot, ain't trying to mess with kinfolk who come from cold, and have less and less patience dealing with that. They got less patience to deal with things that are just outside of their own nature. So yo, give me that spicy food. I'm not trying to feel cold this winter or whatever else, and this and the other. They have to deal with it, but the further one ages, the further one becomes entrenched within one's own basic primordial earthly nature. And same thing, cold, hot, whatever else. Wet, dry, cold, blah, 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 blah. Hot, blah, 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 blah. But the American culture is one of faking it, and pretending to get along and everything else like that. Because if one doesn't, then they look mad. And particularly amongst the younger generation, oh, why are they so mean? Da 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 da. And there's so much corruption amongst the adults that even just the ideas, the thoughts of children are so influential in adults' lives that adults are extremely motivated to keep up the appearances and just pretend things are like copacetic and everything. Even when cats can't stand each other, they both know they need their children to think that they do. And so both are very motivated to keep it, oh no, couldn't be better, blah blah blah, glad to hear it, blah 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 blah, and continue on. And when they have something bad to say, they try not to say it in front of the other children, because then the children say, wait a minute, you used to talk to so-and-so the other day, and now you're saying da-da-da. The children, they're not ready to hear that yet now. They haven't been corrupted enough and whatever else to be acculturated and conditioned and corrupted and controlled to be able to be presented with the honesty of what the kinfolk are thinking and doing. So that's the scene. Meanwhile, it plays itself out with people being fake as fuck in public, and there's certain places, there's certain circles or whatever where it becomes the further thing, but people make their way to try to migrate away from that, all right, and be amongst their own kind. So that's just the general culture. So that's part of the difficulty, because to have an honest conversation, that's why it's like such a relief to talk with somebody who's, and to be in company and being like an environment outside of the United States, because it doesn't, like, Europe is further racist than the United States is, and it's further naturally racist. Scandinavia is further naturally cold-blooded and unapologetically racist than the United States generally is, and that's a quasi thing, because the United States is racist in a different way, because it doesn't have a sense of self. The thing about it though is you can still, like, there's an honesty, and you can still have like a legitimate conversation, because it's unapologetic. It's not pretending for the most part of not being racist. And so, like, I don't like that. That's fine. Okay, cool. No, you can have that. That's your thing. Fine. Don't try to like make that the norm here, because we got a different nature. We do things different here. Same thing with Africa. We're not trying to have all these popsicles or whatever over here. We got cassava and we got tropical fruits, natural pineapples and coconuts. That's how we get refreshment and flavor. So, anyways, it's a refreshment. It's a refreshment. It's refreshing to be in environments where people are just genuine and honest, and you could feel the energy, like, and that's not saying kinfolk, everybody here is hateful. It's such a paradox, because even though there's a fakeness, at the same time, ironically, and like, this is like, we got to wrestle with God on this, and like to understand and like reconcile with this, because at the same time, one of the beautiful things about America and Americans is that many Americans are very much conditioned and acculturated to being with people who are different from themselves. And so even like the nature of Americans is intrinsically increasingly multicultural. What the fuck? What am I saying? Wait, it's race. It's fake as fuck, but at the same time, it's actually multicultural. Huh? Actually, yeah. What? Because America is an infusion of all the different cultures of the peoples who come here. And even though cats can't stand each other, in using technology and saying words and applying stories and lessons and like solutions from different cultures, people like depend upon those things. And so people are intrinsically multicultural even when they can't stand the cultures or whatever else per se. So there's still an intrinsic like familiarity and normalization. Anyways, it's a work in progress, y'all. And meanwhile, like it's still that scene. Not everybody's at each other, not everybody's pointing it, but it's a norm within society, and it's for those who particularly who are mixed. And I can't even talk about mixed people now because mixed people are not starting, but mixed people are. I got to be careful about this. There are a lot of mixed people who are just quiet, are being low key, staying out the limelight or whatever else. That's the majority. That's the majority of every group, every ethnic group. There are a lot of mixed kinfolk who are selling out. There are a lot of mixed kinfolk who are fake as fuck. There are a lot of mixed kinfolk who are hating on other ethnicities and even hating on other mixed kinfolk who are of other ethnicities. There are many mixed kinfolk who are getting paid to hate on other ethnicities. There are many mixed kinfolk who are getting paid to hate on even mixed kinfolk of other ethnicities to push an agenda of other ethnic communities. And that's nasty, and it's frustrating because then people say, wait a minute, that person's mixed and they do this, and they're very active in mixed people, and they work with all different types of mixed people. Yeah, but you know what, they don't too mess with this particular type of mixed people. They don't like Africans too much, or they don't like Asians too much. They don't like Jews too much. They don't like Arabs too much. They don't like Muslims too much. They don't like Chinese too much. And so that's what we're dealing with at the moment. Is it might be an American, like just American kind of like an American-backed mixed kinfolk. It might be a Eurasian, and they are kind of backed and supported by like groups or companies or whatever else that don't like black people, and it's a very low-key, quiet kind of shade. But basically, like in that particular, and I can actually name names, but I'm not going to do it because that's the point. But I'm describing the scenario so there's some understanding of what I'm talking about, and I'll give a balanced example in another direction. So in one scenario, it's a Eurasian group, and it's a Eurasian leadership that has a lot of backing by private funders, investors, and whatever else to do things. They do programming, and it's all happy-go-lucky and everything. But at the same time, like, yeah, we're not inviting no black people to this joint. Just very low-key, quiet. We won't say anything about it, but just we'll be very quiet about it. Like, yeah, we don't say this to any black people, and we won't say anything about black people out loud. We're not gonna say anything directly, but yeah, we're just not about that life. Whenever there's a group of that approaches us and everything, yeah, no, but we don't have. That sounds fantastic. Just don't have availability. Kind of that runaround type of thing. And if there ever becomes like just a point where it becomes just too obvious and they have to have some kind of face just to quell some of the suspicion or whatever, then it's going to have to be one of those pre-selected, pre-identified, pre-approved sellout black folk faces in order to prove that we're not racist type of situation. And this is Eurasians. So in that process, meanwhile, the backers, the investors or whatever, just say, well, we know about this mixed heritage group and they're doing this other thing other. So, and they say this about that particular candidate, or they say this about black people. So, you know, it has to be true because they're mixed themselves. That type of situation. Now, in the same kind of thing, but flip side, we can talk about a mixed black-white group or leadership, or whatever. It would be difficult to call it actually mixed because still black-white kinfolk are still struggling even just to like get established amidst the hatred. And actually, there's something else to talk about at this moment as well whilst we're here. Over an hour at this joint. What up? So, but let's just say in this scenario, it's a black-white leadership, and they're mixed. They do multiculturalism as whatever else. I mean, we already know just the history of black folks selling out in many different ways. So that just because somebody's black, it don't mean nothing. Because cat folk, how about that? That too, kinfolk, cat folk, all that. Cats and kinfolk can sell out and be the sellout face, and I can name names about people who are prominent names and figures or whatever, who even have like significant credentials that are selling. I'm not talking about Brendan Umar Johnson. I'm not talking about that at the moment. I'm actually thinking about somebody else. I'm not trying to share their name because we're not trying to do shade. We love everybody. We're not trying to throw anybody the bus. But there's a lot of cats that are sellouts and everything else, and that ain't nothing new. And that's not even just mixed people. That's kinfolk can be dark as what and thorough sellouts. So for any type of reason and to different degrees of severity. So all that being said, let's say in this scenario there is a mixed kinfolk who talks about multiculturalism. Again, it has backup and additionally has their support, but it just so happens like this kinfolk, they don't like Asians, they don't like Chinese kinfolk, they don't like Korean, they don't like Japanese, and have all different types of things to say about how suspicious Asians are, and they don't invest this and the other. And so it's cross hatred, and it's divisive, and it's polarizing, and it's divide and conquer type of situations. So it's across the board, and it's bullshit. And whenever it happens, and it's frustrating because mixed kinfolk, it's further difficult to call mixed people out on being racist, because what are you talking about racist? I'm mixed. Some of the most da-da-da people I know. So anyways, that's what we're dealing with in the mixed community. So when people criticize things that mixed people do and ways mixed people are used is legitimate. But at the same time, don't throw the whole peoples under the bus in that process. We're getting into a whole other topic right now. But going back to the classic scene we were talking about in Glorious Bastards, I guess we're just talking about the multiculturalism, that the people being fake as fuck isn't just homogenous people, it's mixed people too, being fake as fuck. And having them shooters, trying to think of another vernacular for gun pistols, whatever, pointed at other groups while smiling in their faces and everything else like that. Now, just again, for the record, we ain't got no weapon, so we ain't got nothing hiding on the table. We up here on Front Street. So, there it is. Now, third scene, how could you be so obtuse? We're just talking to American people at this point, American citizens. And this is not a subliminal wish for people to experience what happened to the warden, but we are dealing with that type of level of obtusity, of people like, we've been hollering at you for so long, and you refuse to like even acknowledge like what's going on, and you're still gonna like participate in it, and double down and get entrenched in it. American citizenship at this moment is obtuse. That's not shade, it's pain, to be honest. It's not even shade. Could say facts. It's not hate, it's pain. Because people still, particularly those who claim to for whatever activist cause across the board, anybody who's still American citizen, how is this? And how is not like everybody talking about that? How are people not like recognizing like the necessity? And I personally am on this for over 20 years. And I personally abstain from like hitting people over the head or whatever else with it, because I'm not trying to do that for the past 20 years. Do what I can at the moment. It gets to the point where I actually leave the country rather than hit people over the head or whatever else, figuratively or literally. I leave the country and they keep bringing us back in, to the point where it just becomes too ridiculous. Like, again, how can American citizenship be this obtuse? And we say that. It's pain because we want people to be well. And it's not just a matter of like advocating for the victims of the atrocities that American citizens are committing at this very moment. It's for American citizens themselves. Because do you not see like what is in front of you at this moment? What is approaching? All right, so that's the third scene, and it's not wishing that scene. It's trying to encourage kinfolk and painfully thinking striving to think of the solution, doing it directly, doing it indirectly, doing it like with tough love, doing it with tender love. But corruption has a way of absorbing each of the approaches to the point where we just have to like distance. Even reaching out to youth at this point, it's like can't even reach out to youth because that gets called suspect, and whatever else. It's like wow. Now, all right, that's that. Now, the other thing also is this was a documentary, and I've shared this before on recent joints or whatever. But the documentary is a very interesting one. It was about from 20 years ago, to be honest. Actually, after the 11th of September, just perhaps a few years. It was a PBS thing, I think. But in this documentary, it shows like a process. It was a competition, a bidding competition between like two huge military companies that produce like war machines, literally war machines, particularly air fighters. I don't think Boeing was one. Lockheed Martin might have been one, but like two of the biggest names in aircraft construction were bidding for this huge lucrative contract that the United States was offering. Like, I won't even say billions. It's like I won't say trillions. That might be a little bit much, but multi-billion. Like, if you think about how much one aircraft costs, particularly like an advanced fighter jet 20 years ago, whatever. Easily over $1 billion per, or I shouldn't say easily, but perhaps a billion per. I have to look at the mathematics, and I'm offline at the moment. But that's like for one, and this is a contract, like a revamping of the Air Force, and in the interest of making this particular fighter with these particular specs to be the feature aircraft fighting machine at least 20 years ago, F-21 or whatever it was. And part of the specs was like to be able to lift up vertically like a Harrier jet, like from the British Air Force. That's a unique technology. So the United States military, the Air Force, wanted the aircraft carrier, the new I think it was F-21. Like I think the biggest thing at the end was the F-18 or something like that. But anyways, one feature was to lift up vertically like a Harrier jet. Again, a very unique thing in the Air Force at that, in international air military aviation at that point. Don't know what it is at the moment, but one of that, I think another like qualification was to be able to, or requirement was for it to be able to reach sonic speed. I think was another one. And there were like three basic things that the Air Force wanted to be able to do, and so it had yet to be done. And so it was a bidding process for the biggest military companies to be able to construct a model airplane with those specs. And then the one that does that most convincingly in presenting to the government, U.S. government, wins that contract. And that contract is like manufacturing that prototype for like the next however many years, 20 years or whatever. So a huge contract, because each one is like billions. And you're talking about constructing things for a number of years, maybe over 100, maybe over 1,000 aircraft. So right there, if that's 1,000, a billion times 1,000, it's like a $1 trillion contract. So huge stakes, huge money involved in this contract. And so it was serious. And like this is serious competition amidst like the most serious kind of competitors, military warcraft people. It's the type A, masculine, top dog mentality people at the prime. Like that's the epitome. So the documentary is like going through the process of how each of these companies bids for it, goes through the process of how they did the development, the design, the actual construction of their prototypes, the different stages of negotiation with the U.S. government about updates and everything else, to the point where it gets actually to the presentation. And as I recall, one of the companies, like they made a prototype that didn't even meet the three specifications, and they tried to present that, and they were like, that was the best they could do, given the time frame and everything else like that. And this was one of like big things. The other team was able to do all three specs. I think if I recall the details correctly, was able to do all three specs, and it was just like basically solid presentation, solid prototype, and they had to do a function. They had to do like a demonstration, show like a pilot flying it, showing it can actually do everything in front of the military leadership, generals and whatever. Or, do they have generals in the Air Force? It probably wasn't just the Air Force. It was an oversight committee, whatever, most likely. But anyways, had to do a presentation in terms of the U.S. government, military officials, and addition. And this is all documentary. It's actual thing, presumably. I mean, it's a documentary. You trust everything, right? Anyways, except for the 11th September scenario from the government, but that's not the story. But it's applicable to this story. Anyways, all those disclaimers proclaimed. Continuing on. So again, there might have been other bidders that just fell off the process. There might have been, I don't even know if they're international bidders, like perhaps an Airbus or something like that, but America wants to keep it in-house. If the government's not gonna do it themselves, they want Americans to be the ones that get the contract, particularly for something this big. So it was to like Boeing or Lockheed Martin or one other joint. Anyways, all the other like middle tier, only so many companies can actually put this together and be credible bidders to be able to put that prototype together and be credible in having like establishing factories to do it and everything else like that. So it was like the creme de la creme of the military complex. So there might have been bidders, they fell off to the point where there was only two at the end. And then one of them didn't even, the prototype they actually went and completed, like extremely going through all the expenses, didn't even have the basic specs that was a requirement for the project. So when it came down to it, the decision was made. And I'm getting actually to a point here, which is one, well, the decision is made, and one of the government oversight committee or whatever selects one of the companies to be the bid grantor or bid recipient to actually go forth and construct the aircraft. And again, this is like 20 years ago. So that's what happens. They're happy. They get the big contract. Peace and blessings, brother. All right. They get the big contract and everything else like that. And there it is. Now the other company, they're the losers in this one. And this was like high stakes. This wasn't like everybody wins basketball, middle school tournament or whatever. This was like high stakes. Everybody wants to be the winner. Top dog, type A personality, alpha male personalities. So, and we see one company lose. We see in that documentary a demographic, a unique and significant demographic within American culture that is hardly ever shown in losing in life. So to see that, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't think that was possible. White males who are like millionaires and top alpha males actually losing, albeit to other white American males, millionaire alpha males, whatever. But still, wait, that's not supposed to be shown. That's not supposed to be made public. And not only that, that's one thing. Just to see that, that's one point for this. The other thing is, like to see what what their reaction is to like losing, and it was a lightweight amazing, to be honest. And I mean, it's not surprising, but can something be amazing and not surprising at the same time? If it is, then this was one of them. But what the thing is, it was like groveling. It was like low key groveling, because all the requirements, all the protocols of the competition, the big competition, were very plain and clear the whole time through. And part of the description was like, this is an all or nothing kind of thing. Like plain and simple. That's what this is all about. One company is going to get the contract. The other company is going to lose. The other company is going to like go through a lot of expenses. I don't know if the military, the U.S. military, paid for the construction or whatever. I don't remember those details. But they still, even in getting compensated monetarily, there might have been something. But even getting compensated monetarily for the expenses of making the presentation and constructing that one prototype, and additionally still just spent, this was like years. This was like 2-3 years in that process of doing this huge thing. Instead of doing other projects, instead of doing other bids, like the company invested heavy in winning this contract. So it's high stakes. They're putting up something that's not replaceable. So when that happens and when that plays out and they lost, which if I recall, they should have known they were going to lose anyways because they didn't complete a prototype that had the 3 specs in it. When that happens, they part of what the documentary shows is the immediate reaction of the bosses of that company when they get the news that they didn't that they lost the bid. And one of the reactions of the bosses is, the boss asks a question that he already knows the answer to. The audience knows the answer to. It's been said already clearly. And what the boss asks is like, so is this an all or nothing kind of thing? Are there any like consolation things or whatever? Like, they were asking for a handout. That wasn't the terms. You knew that before that. This is all or nothing. What you doing asking at this moment? Big boss, alpha male, multi-million-dollar, da 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 da. Warcraft manufacturer asking if there are any consolation arrangements. Do we get something out of this? Can we get? I mean, if we don't win the contract, can we get something? What the fuck? You supposed to be boss dog, and you constructing aircrafts to bomb and kill fools, and you're asking if there are any scraps available after the competition that you knew already the stakes in. Now, that's no shade on the brethren, but I mean, it's the mentality. Like, wait, hold up, this is the boss dog who's making aircraft war machines, like going out to kill people, knows what the stakes are in the bid process, asking again, wait, just to make sure, like, do we get anything? Like, is there anything we get? It's almost like it's remindful of like Esau asking for inheritance after he already gave it away. Now it's worse than that, because the company knew beforehand the answer to the question. So for him to ask that, it's like, you supposed to be top dog, no apologies, no weakness. You lost. Take it and go on. Now the actuality is explained in the documentary later, is that company went belly up. They couldn't, because of that. They put all their chips on that bid, and they had to basically they got taken over by either the company that won it or another company. But they were insolvent at that point. They were absorbed. It was a merger or a takeover, and that company was gone. Obviously some of the personnel gets absorbed into the new company, whatever, but it was gone. Now I have to remember again, I don't have to, but like the name of the company, it was the big ones. Lockheed Martin. I don't think Boeing was one of them. Boeing might have thought about it and then just didn't do it for whatever reason. But I think there was another big name military weapons manufacturer that was bidding for it and that lost it. So, anyways, or if it wasn't Lockheed Martin itself, I don't know if Lockheed Martin is still active, but one of those joints, the big name joint, dissolved, went belly up, got taken over, and the bosses, what are they? Their corporate parachutes or whatever else. I don't recall specifically the details of that, but I mean, it just shows the stakes in that process, and also the mindsets of the most alpha. So, anyways, point for all of that is showing a precedent of how kinfolk who have a certain mentality of invincibility and a bravado to match have to deal with conditions of disappointment and even like high stakes consequences. So for some people who are conditioned to perceive that as being an impossibility, how you doing? Peace and blessing, bro. For many people, billions of people who are conditioned and programmed to perceive certain kinfolk, certain cultures of the world at this moment being invincible and untouchable and unquestionable, to see this documentary of such kinfolk, when things go down and everything, and the consequences playing out that way. Hold up, peace and blessings, brother. All right, that when things go down, actually people are not even just invincible and whatever, but even fragile and vulnerable and everything else like that. So, and that's not for the purpose of conquest. It's not for the purpose of that's what you get, da 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 da. It's just a matter of recognizing that everybody, as Don Corleone says, everybody has that touchability. So, and that's not the purpose. That's a little bit of a charged reference there. So my point is, I won't say touchability. I say vulnerability. Everybody has has a temporality, and uh, and again, in recognizing that the point isn't to vilify people, it's to take advantage of people and take an opportunity of being predatory amidst such people. It's a matter of recognizing the levelness in the playing field ultimately and immediately. And in recognizing that, recognizing what our role in is within these conditions. So that is the purpose of sharing that, even at the level of the warcraft manufacturers for the biggest military machine world civilization knows to date. Lightweight, perhaps. So those are some of the considerations. Now, one other thing I mentioned, I shared Brethren Umar Johnson's name, and this is not shade, it's not intended as hate or whatever else, but there's something also that's important that occurs concerning these conditions. First of all, again, we have yet to talk with kinfolk directly, so we have to be mindful of that and qualify what we say accordingly. In addition to that, when we see things online, we have to be mindful of all the different types of misrepresentations and everything else like that. Now, that being said, there are enough sound bites, interviews, and conversations to show a certain amount of like regularity and confidence in concerning some of the things that are said and the shade that is done. So we continue to speak about that, and this is particularly one thing that's beneficial to recognize. As I mentioned before, just the hate against the people and Brethren, it's not just Brethren Dr. Umar himself. It's not just himself. It's the kinfolk around him immediately, but then even further, it's the community. It's the collective of people. It's the immediate crew around that are supporting and additionally the message and the sentiment and the vitriol. But then even further, it's the further numbers of people. Community, I won't say how many numbers, but just the further collective of people who listen to that, who vibe with that, and additionally, who feel some kind of like confidence and boost of self, and additionally, and this is not hate, this is not reactionary hate, because we do see critics of brother Dr. Umar Johnson. We do see critics who do like say like what they say, clap back at him, and we don't agree with what the critics say because do I say names? I'll say one name specifically. It's not shade to hit, this is not hate towards him, but we'll just say we don't agree with what he says about Brother Dr. Umar Johnson. So this is not the same thing along those lines. But Brethren Lenore Honor is Lennon Honor. I'm not trying to clown. Just again, name sometimes is difficult. But there's a brethren who has music, and see his content a number of years ago, to be honest, and see him talking about Brother Dr. Umar Johnson from years ago. But what we recognize is he seems to have a fixation, like updating and just like hating on Brother Dr. Umar Johnson. So it's one thing to criticize, but like when one makes it that one person's thing, and like everything that somebody else does, it's like hate on it. It's like, hold up, what you doing? Now, what I'm doing is I'm responding to just getting inundated with like messaging about or links and suggestion. Continuing whenever, just looking for mixed people, and so I'm responding to that, and there seem to be further new things, and then I'm sharing further insight in this experience. So it's not a matter of just like keeping like a day ticker about how much the school hasn't been open or whatever. We want brethren to have their school, kinfolk school, and to educate and be learned. Like we support that. We don't hate on nothing like that. What we take issue with is kinfolk just hating on us, and it is hate. Because the way you talk about people, the way you get charged about it, the way you're disrespectful towards kinfolk, not just to us directly, but talking about our parents, talking about our ancestors, dismissiveness, disassociation, is thorough. It's not that type of disrespect is hate, plain and simple. So that's one thing. Now, the further consideration is to recognize, again, just talking about the nature of relationship, ancestors, and family, to understand that when there's a vitriol, to just be honest about what happens, because when you talk about mixed people, you're charging into something and you're tapping into something that is extremely painful and extremely live, meaning that it's like a raw wound, and it's just like putting one's fist in and just getting all up in it. and without the intention of healing, just to cause a reaction from the body. That's what the intention is, and it hurts everybody. It hurts all black folk. It hurts all mixed folk. It hurts all kinfolk, because you're not just talking about individuals. You're not just talking about a demographic of individuals, and that's the whole thing. The whole mentality, the whole approach is just it's so very un-African, because it's not recognizing who you're actually talking about, and the effects of what you're talking about. Because when you talk about mixed people, you're talking about families. You're talking about parents, mother, father. You're talking about husband and wife. You're talking about children. You're talking about cousins. You're talking about grandparents. You're talking about aunts and uncles and nephews and nieces and grandchildren and great aunts and great uncles and all of that. That's who you're talking about when you talk about mixed people. Now, you might have a certain type in mind who you're criticizing, but when you talk about across the board, you're talking about straight up, legitimate, dark-skinned African kinfolk who have relatives who are mixed, that they love, that they ride or die with. And so when you throw the mixed kinfolk under the bus, whether they're American or whether they're British or whether they're Deutsch or whether they're Congolese or whatever, you're throwing Africans under the bus, because they're like, yo, you don't talk about my cousin like that. Don't talk about my brother like that. That's what you are doing when you talk about mixed people. Categorically, unapologetically, exaggeratedly, hyperbolically, disrespectfully, and unapologetically, without a pause. You're talking about Africans, you're talking about black folk, you're talking about aunties, black aunties that you're supposed to love, you're talking about black uncles that you're supposed to love, you're talking about black grandparents, you're talking about black fathers, black mothers, black cousins that are ride or die with their family, because you know in the African culture what it is with family. If you being Afrocentric, you know what it is, and you know who you speaking on when you speak like that. So that's not a threat. It's just understanding for people who particularly the followers who get on board and like get some kind of sense of confidence and affirmation from the shade, to be mindful of who kinfolk are talking about and understand the effects, the ongoing effects, the long-term effects of that type of propaganda and that type of hate. You delving into people's families. So that's part of the mindfulness. In addition to that, and this is another thing, is that enough said in that respect? To just recognize that you're not just talking about mixed people, that you're talking about straight up pure Africans, quote unquote, dark skin, whether they're Africans, whether they're black folk, from the country, from the city, from the hood, from the ghetto, wherever, who have a cousin who's mixed Latino, who's mixed white, who's mixed Asian, and they love, ride or die. You're talking about them. You're disrespecting their kinfolk, and they may be married to straight up black, and they may be all the way black. So when you throw mixed kinfolk, all mixed kinfolk under the bus, when you talk about mixed kinfolk categorically with those policies and further, don't even know. Again, those policies are just so illegal anyways. Like, what you talking about? But you throwing black people under the bus too, who you supposed to love and be ride or die for. You're throwing them brethren under the bus too. So there's a concern of like you not being aware of what you're actually saying, and not being responsible in what you're saying, not caring about what you're saying, just identifying what you perceive as an easy target and who you're sanctioned to go at, because that's what your bosses allow and that's what your bosses sign up for. So that was a little bit of a clap, but it's not intended as a clap. That's facts. That's facts, because that's the nature of the game, and it's not hate. It is not hate. We want you to be Afrocentric. We talk about repatriation. If you talk about building shop here, let's roll. Let's talk about it. Let's be respectful and not throw each other under the bus in that process. But if we're going to be plantation, first of all, we're not going to be plantation. We're not citizens of of the U.S. That's just evidence in and of itself. So let's just be real. Let's be honest, and let's be ongoing. Anyway, that was one thing. Here's another thing too. And now this is specifically our brother Umar Johnson. This is not shade. This is an observation, and there's uncertainty about the details or about the veracity of this observation. But here's the thing, and I'm going to also preface this by saying there's so much that we actually agree with concerning Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson. A lot of his criticism about the United States is accurate. A lot of his criticisms about the culture, a lot of his criticisms about many mixed people. Again, like, first of all, recognize Obama is not the epitome of mixed heritage. Kamala Harris is not the epitome of mixed heritage. So to identify such individuals as figureheads and then make categorical statements about mixed people and mixed policies, and additionally, that's erroneous. And when you mix, that was years ago. I don't know what the same policy is, this sort of thing about not allowing mixed relationships, whatever. And there's legitimacy within those concerns about black folks selling out and there being a systemic intergenerational culture of self-hatred, and we don't disagree with that. We acknowledge that, but at the same time, the solution to that is further involved, and it's actually further simple than what you're suggesting, because we agree with you, but at the same time, your solution of staying in the United States and just outlawing relationships with people in the United States, that's disgenuine. If you're going to be all the way black, Africa, that's what it is. That's plain and simple. But when you're like proposing to like set up shop in a racist society and abide by racist laws, gain titles to land and deeds and contract with racist institutions, and then outlaw members of your crew to be in a marriage or otherwise with people who are from the other community, that's bullshit. That's just so, regardless of, it's so illogical. It's not even hypocritical, whatever. It's a falsity. It's an intentional, the logic of that is so, the contradiction, the hypocrisy is just too obvious. Like it's a game. It's a grift. It's just too flawed. It's too fundamentally flawed to be genuine. But at the same time, too few people seem to have the capacity, at least a number of years ago, to call that out and call it for what it is. Because those who see that or actually have increased propensity of seeing it want to hear the black message too much to call that out, and ain't nobody else giving that. And the people otherwise who are racist and additionally don't even want to think about the whole situation anyways. So they're going to be, at least historically, few people to actually call that out who care enough to call it out. But the whole premise is just so fundamental. And again, don't know specifically if that's still the policy. But when we hear the rhetoric continuing on as it does, like we see that it seems like there's little that has changed since then. So along the lines, again, we begin to question like the nature of the responsibility. Like, first of all, you're saying things that you don't seem either to recognize like the extent of what you're saying, like who you're actually talking about, your own people, who you're supposed to love and be so much an advocate for, you're throwing under the bus. And we're talking about love, like decent, hardworking, no sellout, in the hood, laying low, working on a daily basis, loving their peoples, loving their family, taking care of their responsibilities, ain't trying to be big at the name or whatever else. That's who we're talking about. And you're throwing those kinfolk under the bus when you throw mixed people categorically under the bus. The relationships that we have, family, that's one, let alone friends, the people we grow up with, and additionally the people that we continue to be loyal with and communicate with. You're throwing those relationships into chaos and disorder and dissonance, because now people look at each other different. You're just sowing dissonance within the collective community. And we can say that's not African, that's not Afrocentric, that type of divisiveness, but at the same time, Africa's full of divisiveness between tribes and indigenous, so we can't say that categorically, but it's different than the Afrocentric principles that we celebrate within Kwanzaa, with the Hosea, with Kemet, and further. all those things that are supposed to be part of the tenets of what people stand for when spitting this vitriol, it's a direct abrogation of. It's sowing seeds of dissonance, distrust, divisiveness, and further. At the very micro relationship level, within families, between friends, lifelong friends, hood friends, and additionally, sowing these seeds of distrust, suspicion, uncertainty, accusations, and otherwise, subordination, apologetics, and all that other type of stuff. So there's a concern whether brethren either one are aware of that or actually even care. Second, either care about that and are doing it intentionally. That's one thing. Now, similarly, along those same lines, and that's for brethren Dr. Umar Johnson and the crew around him, and that's not hate, that's not shots fired. We continue That's the hood siren. That's the hood siren right there. That muffler is the hood siren. Anyways, this is not shade. This is not hate. We love everybody. We love brother and Dr. Umar Johnson. And he's strong intellect, charismatic, strong speaker. We appreciate that. And we support the benevolence within what he's doing. And the kinfolk around him who support him. We support the benevolence within the kinfolk around him. And we love the kinfolk around him. We don't agree with, obviously, all of it. And we have concerns about much of it, or I should say some of it. So that's okay. We can disagree about things, and we can call bullshit out and call it bullshit and still love you. It's not an all or nothing thing like some Lockheed Martin military contract. Just like if you know what it's like to be in a set, presumably somehow or other, and you can have extreme rivalry with somebody in your own set that you don't even talk to, but at some point it comes to a head, and you've been in those type of situations where cats is about to get at each other in the set, and you can't let it out because this is the set. So in that situation, squash this out, speak it out, let's hash it out, brethren. We gonna have a set. Everybody's here, all the brethren are here. Let's talk it out. Get it out. Get it out. Whatever you got going on, get it out. And we're not going to leave this room until it's out. And then if it gets into fisticuffs, make sure it's fair. No sneaking or whatever. If it gets like that, if it need be, if you got to put on boxing gloves or whatever, we're going to squash it. We're going to settle this here. And when we get it all through, if it's through verbally, okay, get it all out. Make sure it's all out. Don't let nothing out. Don't leave nothing out. Don't leave nothing behind. Get it all out now. Don't let this stew for the next 5 years or whatever. Let's get it all. No, we done dealt with this already long enough. Get it out now. Both of y'all, get it out now. And if it gets heated or whatever, all right, all the brethren step aside. Let them at it. We gonna deal with this one way or the other. And now, once it is all out, you've spoken it all out, you've gotten it all out, everything, you ain't leave nothing out. Y'all done got physical. Now, all right, got it all out. All right, now let's squash it. Y'all better pound up, hug it out, pound it out. All right. Now, cut the bullshit and let's get to business. We can disagree with each other, and we can still love each other. Even we can still respect each other. We should still respect each other and get to business. Because for those who are in the know, for those who claim to know and be whatever, ain't no time for this bullshit. Ain't got no time to play around. If you being a leader and you claim to know things of what's going on, there's no time to bullshit and play this bullshit divide and conquer politics, plantation politics. So now that being said, that's for Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson, for the crew around him, and for all the people who listen, who buy into, who call him on their shows, who sit and reason with him, and everything else. All kinfolk, anybody. That's not hate. We're not challenging people. We're calling out the bullshit, and we're encouraging kinfolk to be honest and reason. This ain't the time for taking pot shots at easy targets. The stakes is too high. And everybody who's looking at easy targets, you know already that you one of them. So, if it need be, let's powwow. Let's get it out. Let's sit direct and talk to each other directly. Don't talk to people who are just gonna take it. Don't talk to like people who are already compromised and ain't gonna call you out on bullshit. It's about to give a reference from the message. Your peers and your equals. It's difficult to find in the mixed community because most mixed kinfolk are quiet and laying low, because that's the nature of who we are. Which is why you coming at us anyways? If you coming at cats who are sellouts or whatever else, fine, call the sellout out, but don't not call it the whole people. Anyways, that's the one thing. Now we've got something else to say about this as well. That's beneficial to recognize, and this is specifically pertaining to Brother Dr. Umar Johnson, and it's specifically pertaining to him, but it's also speaking to, like, we got some further hood sirens going on. And that's different from the souped up engines or whatever. That's different. That's not it. That's not the hood siren. So anyways, this is specifically pertaining to Brother Dr. Umar Johnson. But it's again, we can be accused of calling him out on this, but this is important to recognize. And it's particularly recognized not just in his particular specific instance, but also in other kinfolk who exhibit, peace and blessings, kinfolk who exhibit similar tendencies, positions of authority, who have knowledge and do some of the same things. So this is what we observe. This is what we consider recently, which is this. Brother Dr. Umar Johnson, through the years, does a service to people, for people. In the Philadelphia area, traveling around the nation, traveling around the world or whatever, talking to people. But even before he gets to the point of being like a circuit speaker, doing service, working with particularly black brethren, young folk, youth, in the field of psychology, counseling, and additionally. So respect for that service, appreciation, and further. That, again, we talk about service, that's service. Being a school bus driver is service. Don't sleep. Daily waking up, being reliable through the elements of the weather, and additionally safe driving a vehicle, dealing with all the tests that children put authority figures through, disrespect, acting a fool, looking for love and strength and discipline. Children put adults and teachers through so much. That's not a hood siren. Just for the record, that's not a hood siren. Motorcycles are not the hood siren. Motorcycles are motorcycles. That's a different thing. That's not shade, but that's just not the hood siren. Children, and there's no shade towards children, but children put adults, particularly teachers and people in authority figures who are trusted not to get back through trials and tribulations, and particularly school bus drivers and similar people who are in that kind of line of work, because there's a certain disrespect that society provides, and a kind of like dismissiveness, but at the same time, school bus drivers are providing a needed service of transportation, safety, babysitting, and further. And again, children put adult caregivers through so many tests that for school bus drivers to do that on a regular basis and to continue that function of driving a bus, that's service. So anyways, that's a side note. So the things that brother Dr. Umar Johnson does in terms of providing that service of counseling and advocacy and like all the war stories that he has in terms of taking up people's causes and representing people who are about to like get like thrown into foster care or whatever else. Like, yo, beautiful, hallelujah, alhamdulillah, baruch Hashem, jai om. Now, that being said, what we question, what we consider, and what we question is how much experience, peace and blessings, buenas noches, what type of experience and what type of relationship and commitment Brother Umar Johnson has at this moment, or actually at all, in terms of actually caring for somebody else on a full-time basis, either as a big brother or as a father, or otherwise. What type of experience that he has? Because it's one thing to advocate for people, and even take up the cause in like a war situation. And I say war, I'm talking about like fighting the courts and like people fighting like impending court orders and police involvement, and additionally, and successfully defending youth from getting put into the system in those respects, staying with the family, having further stabilized things. That's tenacious battles. But at the same time, that's not a life commitment. And and sometimes it's obviously further severe and intense than a life commitment. Some certain life commitments, because it can be like a 24-hour thing for a period of days, or for a period of weeks, or even for a period of months. But at some point, like, the brunt of that responsibility subsides, and somebody else is the primary caregiver and has the responsibility of looking out for for whoever's being advocated for at that moment. And so it can be a very intense experience for a certain period, and like go through all different lengths for the cause at that moment. But at the same time, at some point, it's in somebody else's hands. That youth is in somebody else's hands. The putting food on the table, roof over the head, protection, and additionally, not just those are the basics, but then in addition, like listening to that child for the rest of life, solving the problems, thinking about what they got going on, and additionally, Brother Umar Johnson might have a tremendous follow-up record in terms of keeping track with people and trying to continue to like look out and make connections for education or jobs, whatever. He may do that, but that's still different than being the primary caregiver and be like, this is my child, this is the people I'm looking out for life. It's a different thing. And the reason why we bring that up is because somebody can get a lot of credibility by doing like the advocacy thing as a professional, but at the same time have very little experience personally in terms of caring for people and knowing what it is to have that type of responsibility day in, day out, night in, night out, 24/7. It don't stop, for life, and knowing that's the way it's going to be for life. Because when we have that type of responsibility and that type of experience, it tempers how we get at anybody, generally speaking. I mean, obviously there are people who just knuckleheads and they got lots of children. They may care for their children and still do be knuckleheads. But there is, when we know that weight, that tempers things. And when we profess ourselves to be a leader in taking up the cause for others, when we have that personal experience of that weight of caring for people 24/7, don't stop, that puts a pause on how we talk about others when we are in a position of attention, knowing that our words carry beyond our immediate knowledge. It tempers when we're genuine. It tempers what we say about others, because what we know, not even deep down in our hearts, what we know even like at the immediate level, is that when we say something, we're talking about people's relatives, we're talking about their children, we're talking about their mothers, we're talking about their fathers, we're talking about their uncles and aunties and grandparents and cousins. When we live with that responsibility, we intuitively know that responsibility, and we intuitively and regularly live and speak with that responsibility. We might chop it off, we might fly off the handle here and there, but when we're in a position of notoriety or I won't say celebrity, but like public we speak with a knowledge of that weight and who we're talking about, and how that affects not just who we're talking about, but the people around them. So it's an intuitive thing. All right, peace and blessings. Peace and blessings to you.
God bless you.
God bless you as well. So we say that because it seems that Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson has this tendency of speaking without that mindfulness. Even when he's speaking about his own kinfolk, his own ancestors. Again, I mentioned the Frederick Douglass thing, but even then, it's just a sense, it's just a feel that, like, he says something about people without seeming to have that knowledge of what it is to care for somebody else. Because he has tremendous intellect, tremendous ability of talking and articulating conditions and lines of reasoning. Very skillful, and kudos to him for that. But at the same time, when he says certain things, it's like somebody who would be living in this particular way, like, it doesn't seem like they would be saying something and saying it so matter-of-factly, unapologetically, and otherwise, and like double down on it as well. Somebody who has that weight, like, that doesn't sound like something like a mother would say. That doesn't sound like something a father would say. Because when somebody's talking about somebody else's son, somebody knows that somebody can be talking about their own son in a similar way. And so I was going to put a pause. And when somebody's professing to care about people's sons and then talks about that son, it's like, wait, hold up. Wait, do you have a... So that's what we're talking about. We question whether Dr. Umar Johnson has that kind of experience, or that even it has that relationship experience of caring for somebody else on a 24/7 basis, not just advocacy, not just professional service or community service or whatever, but like knows what it's like to have others within one's own care 24/7. Because you just think you don't if somebody who has that knowledge, regardless of how intelligent somebody is, would be further cautious about how they talk about others. Now, people can break down anything I say, whatever, and I'm not perfect and whatever, don't claim to be, and I say a lot of harsh things. I don't hate nobody. I don't make, well, how do I say this? I'm very careful about making absolute statements. And what I focus on is behavior. Don't focus on ethnic heritage or familial relationship or whatever. I don't make categorical statements in that respect. Any criticisms that I make and any harsh statements that I make speak to behavior. And I call it out regardless. We call it out regardless of what people's ethnicity are, mixed, pure blood, or whatever else. We call out specific when it's one particular group towards another, and additionally we call out that behavior. We don't vilify the entire group. We call out bullshit behavior. When we talk about citizenship, that's not ethnic identity, that's not ancestors, that's not race, that's not even religion per se. It is a behavior. Citizenship is a behavior. It's a people's choice and volitional behavior. So when we call that out, that's what it is. And we don't hate, we love everybody, even all citizens. We just call out the bullshit. So, buenos noches, peace and blessings to you, brother.
Okay, yeah, getting that night walk in.
Yeah, get some air, get some exercise.
That's it.
All right, brethren. Peace and blessings. God bless you as well.
Yeah, he's blessing us like never before.
Ah, always.
The blessings are pouring so strong and heavy right now. Unprecedented power.
Thank you, brethren. Thank you. Hallelujah.
We won. It's a big fight.
Ah, you know what they say? They say we got to pick and choose our battles, yeah?
Yeah.
How about this? Even next level is this. We got to pick and choose our victories.
You know what?
Because the victories are for life.
Ain't no battles.
Okay, it's only ourselves.
That's right. And
Exactly.
we won.
Yo, brethren, thank you for that reminder.
Opposition that comes because it's here.
It's illusion.
It's an illusion.
We are our worst enemies.
Right, and it's just the test of our faith because right now the ascension is vertical.
Why not?
It's not even horizontal.
Why
We're
not?
not even moving at
Wow.
That's power.
Yo, brethren, I appreciate your truth. I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yes.
I feel that light that you're sharing.
That's the power.
So I think, yo, it's seen. We say it's seen.
Speak.
I hear what you're saying.
Speak.
Yo, brethren, you said it. Beyond the words, beyond the words.
Right.
It's the vibration. It's the light manifestation.
Right. And our speaking bridges the gap
Yeah.
between us and the world.
Aha.
So when you speak it, it's already done.
It's the vibrations. You're just giving it the further projection.
Exactly. So it comes back.
Right.
Circular.
Exactly.
We won this thing.
Thank you, brethren.
Victory, healing,
Thank you.
prosperity.
We won this joint.
Peace,
We done won it.
power.
Hallelujah.
We're walking it.
Thanks, brethren.
All right.
Step after step. Step
No
after
accident.
step.
See
All
you
thanks
soon.
and praise to the Most High.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
See you soon.
Brethren, God willing, yes.
See, it's no accident.
Ain't no accidents in this life.
Right. So
It's all divine purpose and calculation.
Right. So as a crazy opposition comes, it ain't real, and speak it out, and it's gone.
They say this ancient teaching is right here.
Yes.
When we're in stillness
Yes.
and we observe the nature around us,
Yes.
that's the equilibrium.
Yes.
We see how it works.
Yes.
And we're like, yo, that's what's going on over there.
Yes.
When we're still
Right.
and we're paying attention. That's the equilibrium. Then we go into motion. We join it.
Yeah.
And that's the harmony.
Yeah.
That's the harmony right there. Step after step, we're joining in that harmony.
Yeah.
But that stillness gives us some perspective.
And peace.
Oh, that's what it is.
And then 'cause
Hallelujah.
We are creators. We created.
Join in it. Join in it.
Right.
Walk in cooperation with the oneness
Hey, like
of the
Mr.
Most High.
Like Mr. T said, I pity the fool.
Bring it back to the streets, brethren. All right.
All right.
Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
Dun, 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 dun.
We got the victory. It's
All right, brethren.
already done.
All right. A team, the A team.
Already won.
All right.
That's alpha.
Hey. So, that's what we were just talking about. We questioned about the type of experience and the mindfulness of how the words influence others who have less knowledge, different knowledge, less awareness, or whatever else, less capability of talking the way that Brother Dr. Umar Johnson does. So we had this for 2 hours now. To be honest, it's very quiet. Very quiet. We're actually appreciative of that, and like we're very appreciative. We give thanks and praise to the Most High for this. Very quiet here. Almost scary quiet. Won't say it is scary, but almost how quiet it is, given like circumstances, even just from yesterday evening additionally. And we don't want to say quiet before the storm. There's tension still ongoing, but the vibe is different now. I mean, there's a mindfulness of this being surveillance already as we speak, as it's being shared. Almost done cuss. I ain't been cussing too much right here. We on the streets. Maybe that's another reason why. Yeah, but all right, battery's decent, but the storage we starting to dip into that joint. So, anyways, that's pretty much it. How about some Haile Selassie? How about some teachings of His Majesty on this topic? I mean, it's just like it's not enough. Like, when did His Majesty Haile Selassie have to deal with? I guess Mussolini would be an example of just like vitriol and hatred, but it was met also. It was complemented by acts of violence, and so His Majesty had to respond to that. So it wasn't just like clapping at people and disrespecting himself or his people or whatever else. I'm trying to think of like other ways when people have just been outright disrespectful, publicly, verbally, just thorough disrespect, not just to oneself but to one's family, one's ancestors, one's forebears, and additionally, without being violent and without threatening violence, but just thoroughly thrown under the bus. That leads to indirect types of violence, devaluation of people, because as I mentioned, mixed people right now, quiet. And when there's that type of shade and there's a normalization, or at least a proliferation of that type of shade, where cats who are who are striving to hear some kind of Afrocentric positivity. And additionally, when this is the prominent option, like it's such an affirmation, but at the same time, part of the cost is then just intrinsically having a lesser thought, a lesser respect and valuation towards mixed people, and then just looking at it differently from that point on. And so that's part of the cost, and that translates in one way or another to actual violence, that devaluation of life itself, particularly when we're dealing with the street situation. So it's not, Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson is not threatening violence to anybody that we know of, and he's dealt with like different types of threats. Oh, I was talking about the Brethren Dr. Lenin honor. I said something about like him just like the way he gets at Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson. It's just like like nitpicking everything, and at the same time, one of the challenges that we have is like Brethren Dr. Lenin honor isn't. We don't see him doing anything further positive. Like we don't see something constructive. It's just like gripes, and he's a U.S. citizen, and he's part of the political process, and so like it's the same thing for us, and so. But again, not every what we're sharing is different from what we observed from Brethren Dr. Lenin honor and Brethren Dr. Lenin honor. He has his own musical talents and skills. Can sing. We question some of the lyrics about that song, that parody song that he has for Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson about the song about the school and everything. But he has his own musical talents. He has his own. Initially he was talking about his own family. This was years ago, and like the ethics that he's cultivating in his family. I think he talks about his raising his children, homeschooling, and additionally, if I recall correctly. But we know he's about a lot of substance. Initially, a number of years ago, but when we just see recent things, it's just been like just commentary about just hate on Dr. Umar Johnson. It's like, yo, what you doing? So, for those who claim to know about what's happening, we ain't got time to be on bullshit. And that's what a lot of kinfolk are on, because that's what a lot of kinfolk get paid for. To be on some bullshit and just to be on some hate shit on others, self-hate on others, and that's how they get their backing. So is that how we get our backing? I don't think so. Can't say for certain, to be honest. What we can say for certain is what we actually do. We don't try to hate on nobody. We won't try to construe it or leave it to be construed as hate. We are constructive, and we are critical when kinfolk are tripping. But we also recognize criticism in itself ain't constructive, and so we try to guide it. But when there's less of that direct communication and reasoning, then we get resorted to joints like this. So for 2 hours, anything else to share on this joint? Do I share this joint? I guess I'll share this whilst I think about it. So, in recent days and weeks, peace and blessings, man. Recent days and weeks, we had the occasion of walking through Little Italy, and this is not pride. This is not like trying to be bravado or whatever. It's business. We got work, as has been the case on previous occasions through the years of walking through Little Italy. It's not a matter of show. It's not a matter of like pomp and circumstance. This is the work at hand, and we're not circling around to whatever else. Now at the same time, when we still have to pass by the racist joints or whatever, we do have to take measures accordingly. Now again, this is not threatening or otherwise. But what I'm talking about is that at this point, part of the protocol is when I go through, I'm not walking with a hammer. That's as I've said before. That's imprudent, as Dana Carvey would say in parodying George W. Bush, a blessed memory. So, anyways, not walking around with a hammer, not walking with that intention or whatever. But at the same time, you just can't let it slide and let it be known. But how can we let it be known without reverting and resorting to the stink bomb situation and causing further agitation? Because all of that isn't our priority. Our priority is the home front. Our priority is securing our village and home experience, establishing our village and home experience. Reverting and resorting to get back at tactics or whatever, even when it's nonviolent, even if it's vandalism or perceived as vandalism or paint, doing paint graffiti or whatever, or stink bombing in during festivals or whatever. All that is not building our houses. All of that is not building our villages. And again, when we recognize like there's only so much time to do things in this life at all, let alone when things is hectic, yo, that's not getting our job done. That's not getting our priorities done. So we can get in for the tit for tat and get into these battles, whatever, but that's bullshit, and it's not getting the job done. We gotta take care of the home front. And yes, when we're disrespected and like cats, for whatever reason, whether they're being hired or otherwise, when they're doing things, we have some type of response. But we have to be very mindful. That is the hood siren right there. We have to be mindful of what we do, the purpose of what we do, the measure of what we do, and the efficacy. So at this point, what our protocol is when we go through, we're singing a song, and I can say what the song is. Actually, I'm not going to say what the song is. I'm gonna leave it as it is. So I'm not going to give too much like decoding or whatever at the moment. But we do sing a song. It is a purposeful song, and it does draw attention. It is, I won't say it's loud and belligerent, but it is vocal. It is distinctive. It does get attention. It is somewhat for that purpose, because we are drawing attention to the injustice and the disrespect that continues to go on against our ancestors exactly at that moment. And that it's not sliding. It's not just a matter of like turning a blind eye and being okey doke. We're letting it be known that this is not okay, and we're letting it be known in a very peaceful and honorable way, but at the same time a way that still gets into kinfolk's head when we know that, and we're doing that with that intention, because it makes it further difficult for people to rest and to feel easy. And additionally, and we know that because kinfolk are stewing with their own guilty conscience already, and we're increasing the volume on it when we're singing this song. Because that's one of the reasons why kinfolk go to Italy, because they want to get that hometown experience and get a vacation. And additionally, patrons and proprietors, and when they got this whatever dude doing this whatever thing, that's getting into that sanctuary experience. So even to this day, Little Italy has no legitimate beef with us. No legitimate beef. What we're doing is a direct response to the direct disrespect that Little Italy is doing to us, and then that disrespect being compounded by stopping us in our own hood, and then even after stopping us, having and soliciting us to answer questions and talk at that moment, still doing the disrespect and being in the brush off, or we'll just have a difference of opinion. Compounding the disrespect with that, and then in addition, in further, employees of Little Italy stealing shit from us in broad midnight, 2-3 a.m. face to face, loud and intentionally loud, like intentionally drawing attention to let it be heard, even perhaps for a benevolent reason. And then in addition to that, urinating on our sukkah tent, our schoolhouse, and then clowning. So it's disrespect upon disrespect, and that's what we're responding to. We avoid going there for a while because of this situation and not trying to escalate. Concerns about our own discipline and being confronted with the disrespect. But at this point, it's like, okay, we're gonna go through it, and when we do, we're gonna be vocal. And it's a high road type of situation, but at the same time, and it might take a while, but it's heard. So, and it's not, and it's not hateful, because at the same time we're doing this to everybody, as we've done for years, and people know that. So, which makes our voice even further loud. And that's not hate, that's not flex. It's part of the nature of truth and walking path. So anyways, that's the scene earlier this evening as I'm walking back from one of the work spots. And this is the point for me sharing this. Isn't a matter of flex and this and the other. I'm just communicating part of the experience and follow from what preceding joints are. some of which are precedingly recorded as well and shared on this thing. So this is just a further for the record. As we're walking through, again, we're singing a song. It's not. There's no cussing in it. It's all legitimate, discipline, ethics, positive. It's in a different language. It'd be difficult for people to immediately translate for those who don't already know it. So at the very least, what they're hearing is somebody speaking a foreign language they don't know, most of which is not Italiano. And so it just is, wait, this is somebody who's brown skinned in a head wrap, this and the other, is singing a foreign language loud, or comparatively loud, not belligerently loud, but loud enough to be heard and pronounced, whilst we're trying to eat and everything up in our hood. Now, there's a pause because kinfolk already, for the most part, peace and blessings, brethren. How you doing? All right? All right. All thanks and praise to the Most High. So, but that's what I do. Now, if it's a stranger that they don't know, there's not a lot of tolerance. That doesn't mean the kinfolk get back at them at that moment, but like, there's tabs. There's tabs on me. But when I do that, there is, well, I'm not trying to be too, the point is it's not ego. My point is just to state what happened. So I go through, I'll just try to be as matter of fact as about this. So I go through, and I'm pieces to everybody that I pass by, as I always am. And as I'm generally known for, presumably speaking. And people respond actually rather thoroughly. And that's not necessarily a telltale sign, because kinfolk could be, like I said, smiley, and have all types of their smiling, particularly because we know what we got going on. So yeah, let's just be smiling for now. But to be honest, the vibration is one of just like that heavy sigh kind of, all right, smile. Okay, I'm reading into things somewhat. That can be matter of fact still, but I'm not trying to be just particularly just plain surface matter of fact. So maybe I'll just do that and get through it. And if there's anything else to read into it, I'll say afterwards. So walk through, say hi to people. Some people I know for a while, and because kinfolk are proprietors in that spot. And there's the usual greetings accordingly. We've already spoken our words. We've already been spoken for the record. So there's little kind of back and forth and conversation as there is previously. No disrespect, no antagonistic words, and the general vibe is copacetic. So now it's a little bit beyond copacetic, because there is some tension. Obviously, there's like some things that are unspoken. There are some uncertainties on both sides about what to read, how to read things. Peace and blessings, brethren. There's some uncertainties on both sides of how to read things. Well, we're not going to be too presumptuous. We're getting to the reading thing. So, all right, man. I'll be matter of fact. Continue on. So we'll walk through. Again, being matter of fact, a number of people say hi. What I'm discerning now is to what I describe in terms of like facial expressions or how people say hi. I won't get into all the details. Just people say hi, unconfrontational, no disrespectful words explicitly spoken, whatever. Just like comparatively mundane kind of interaction and carrying through. So that's the basic gist of it. Now, one thing of note to share is that as I'm walking along, the two statues of question, aren't, it's late at the time already. So basically the protocol that we observe is that usually the figurines are put out during the daylight. Sometimes it might last until the nighttime after day setting, particularly if it's a busy night when there's business or whatever, but generally speaking it's usually during the day. And by the time the day set and it gets dark, even in the early evening, which it was 2.5 hours ago, it was before 9 p.m. because I got to the store before closing. So it was maybe around 8 p.m. thereabouts. So they're like usually the figurines are already inside because it's already dark. Now, on this particular evening, as I walk by, the figurines are already inside. Did I walk there? I must have walked there earlier today, and I must have done it in the afternoon. And if I recall correctly, the figurines were out at that moment, one on each side. Now they're facing each other, so people walk in between the figurines facing each other. So it's again, there's a territorial thing going on with that as well. I'm thinking of another Ronin reference about strategy along those lines. But anyways, so that was the scene when I walked by, and I did that during the daylight, walking through Little Italy to get to the work spot beforehand, and in about 1 p.m. this afternoon at 1300 hours. And again, there's little direct or there's little incident or whatever else, basically interactions. Don't get a lot of strange looks at this point because most kinfolk, even when just being visitors or whatever, might have heard that, yeah, that's that dude. So yeah, don't even look, don't even like pay attention, don't get mad, don't respond. People might say, oh, he's just crazy, or this and the other, as a way of trying to like just like deal with it. But the basic thing even is a lot of kinfolk in this kind of culture, that's not a deterrent. Like, I don't care if he's crazy or anything, I'm not going to tolerate that. But anyways, there hasn't been a lot of like even looks or whatever else, and the air, the vibration has been one of comparative copaceticness. So we're being mindful of that as well. So I walked by the shop on the way back, and at that time, after day set, the two figurines are taken from the sidewalk. The storefront is still open. The door is open to the store, so presumably it's still open. And inside the door, the two figurines are placed there, side by side. So anyways, that's just speaking matter-of-factly. And I continue on. Don't say anything to the store. Don't make any words. Don't get further belligerently loud at that point. Just continue on, and continue through the commute. Now, one interesting thing is perhaps one of the reasons why I'm sharing this is that as I'm continuing out, there were there's a gathering place towards the end of that part of the village, where on occasion there are events there, and people can be drinking, and young people can get a little bit loud or whatever. So as I was leaving the village, there were some people who are yelling a little bit louder, so I just continue singing the song and start going up the hill. It's a nice little walk uphill at that point. And as I get to that point, it becomes dark. There's walls. It's actually rather imposing physicality in terms of just walking up a hill. It can be dark, and depending on the time of the year, particularly in winter, it's like bleak kind of thing, and it's a nice incline. It's a nice little walk, and it's a huge wall on one side and another wall on the other side across the street. So it's like a tunnel almost in terms of the physical, I won't say impediments, but edifices, for lack of a better word. And so it's psychologically, it can be like into everything, but also like walking in terms of streetwise. There ain't no place to run, or whatever else. So anyways, as I'm doing it, I'm in my zone. I do mantras. I sing this song anyways in my walk. I do it as a mantra, particularly because it's less energetic. But this is what I do. Maybe not as loud or vocal, but this is what I do. So as I'm walking up the hill, I'm continuing to sing the song. And as I'm doing that, it might be not as loud as I was when I was going to the village, because I am intentionally louder when I'm going through the village, because I'm letting me know, yo, you don't want this kind of vocalize, do something about those figurines. We've already channeled the priest, so there's no purpose for talking. There's no point for us talking to anybody else in the village other than the priest, because anyways, I won't have to get into all that. But walking up the hill by myself, dark, the big walls on either side, and as I'm doing that, in the zone, all of a sudden somebody comes from behind me. Not startled, not jumped, but somewhat surprised. And usually if somebody's coming from behind, usually they're not walking faster than me. I'm not walking fast at that time. I kind of take my time. So it's a brethren walking from behind, and he's walking on the tree lawn. So, and he's keeping a distance. So, like, there's some intentionality, and he there's an air of him like being familiar with myself. His face is comparatively new to me, but he has an air of like having some idea of knowing who I am, what I'm actually doing in singing that song, and additionally, and not being mad. There's some people who are Italiano who actually don't mess with Little Italy and like mess with what we do particularly. There's some brethren who are Italiano and mess with Little Italy and mess with us, or don't mess with us. So there's all different types. Now on this particular occasion, the brethren was walking distance from me, so he's not walking right up on me, not being threatening physically, and he says something to me, and I'm singing my song, don't even hear him coming up, and now all of a sudden here he is on the side on the tree lawn, and says something to me, but at the same time don't feel the air of threateningness. The way the distance he's keeping is like didn't even not even alarmed at all, just like, oh, it just felt like somebody else walking. Could be he might not have anything to do with it. Can't say for certain one way or the other. Most likely he does, because what he says to me is in Italiano. He speaks Italiano. So, okay, interesting. Now, again, it could be all different types of things. It can be a nice guy, it can be a hitman, it could be all different types of things. Now, there's obviously different probabilities in each of those different scenarios, but ain't no telling one way or the other, to be honest. So, smiling, I'll tell you, like, when I got jumped when I was in high school, kinfolk came up smiling. Yo, what's going on, brother, and all that. Actually started pissing on the yard and everything. Yeah, da-da-da-da-da. Yo, then those cats be tripping. Nice guy. Creep up a little closer, and then snuck on the jaw. So all different types of things. That was 40 years ago? No. 30 years ago? Nah. 33 years ago. So anyways, point is that even when kinfolk are smiley, nice, again, ain't no telling. But the air, the vibe was positive, congenial. So he says something in Italian. I say, what? And I was surprised to see anybody. So after saying that, he continues to smile. He reiterates that. And I try to say something because I'm responding to his energy, which is positive, and he's smiling, keeping a distance. And so I try to respond something favorable and positive as well. And I try to think of what I can say in Italiano to match what he's speaking. It's difficult for me because Italiano is not one of the languages that I'm well versed in. And I'm trying to think of like what phrase that's appropriate at that moment, given what those conditions are or what those conditions might be. What actually I'm doing is speaking Francais. I said Espanol first, and because Espanol is increasingly proximate with Italiano, and then I'm further functional in en Francais, and so I start speaking some Francais. He's presumably literate in both because he speaks Italiano first, then he speaks Francais to match my Francais, and I'm like, okay, and then after all of that, he speaks in English, and he says, you sing beautifully. Appreciate the way you sing. Oh, I said, okay, appreciate that. And it wasn't no homo thing or whatever else like that, but just like, kind of like, it was that, all right, peace and blessings, brother, all right. It was kind of like a knowing, kind of like, yeah, I know what you're doing. I know who you are. I got some information about what the situation is. Respect, peace, and to you. And like what you're doing is, we actually kind of appreciate that, because like we're still trying to figure it out, and we don't necessarily like it all that much, but at the same time, like, no, we got some respect for that. So and meanwhile, you sing kind of decent maybe, and even like when singing off key or whatever else, you're singing high notes and everything. So it's like, wait, you being a gangster flexing and singing loud, but at the same time, like, you singing high and like cracking your voice or whatever. And so, yo, that's kind of funny. And you don't give a fuck either. So, yo, we kind of respect that. All right, we see you. You're not being threatening. We know what you're about, generally speaking. Anybody can trip at any point. But, like, okay. So, that's what he says. The basic words was just like, you sing beautifully. And then just continues walking on. I say, merci. And I say, tout merci à Dieu. I say, all thanks and praise to the Most High. He smiles and continues on. And that's it. So he continues walking up the hill a little bit faster than I am. And continues on his way. So that's part of the scene from earlier this evening, and we had 2.5 hours of this joint. I said there was some other stuff to cover, but at this point, to be honest, we've been at this for a while. So, yeah, we also gotta worry about. We gotta be mindful of that. Still decent with storage. So, anyways, this is the joint for the moment. I'm going to say peace and blessings to Brother Dr. Umar Johnson again. And peace and blessings to all the crew around Brother Dr. Umar Johnson. Peace and blessings to all black kinfolk who listen to Brother Dr. Umar Johnson. And of any ilk of politics or otherwise. Peace and blessings to all kinfolk. Peace and blessings to all kinfolk of Little Italy amidst all the things, whatever. Peace and blessings to all the kinfolk of the city of Cleveland Heights. Peace and blessings to all the kinfolk of the United States of America. Peace and blessings to all the kinfolk of the United Nations. Peace and blessings to all the kinfolk of the world. Peace and blessings to all the kinfolk of the universe. Seen and unseen. You heard. So again, one of the thoughts from today is the heart can only take so much. And at the same time, ain't no limit to what the heart can give. All thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.